Hello and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm Kevin Castley. Thank you for being with us tonight. Tonight we're joined by another great panel. We have joining us here Jaeger DePedo as well as Anthony Roberto. Great to be joined by them as always. In tonight's stream, we are going to be discussing the Lincoln Project versus Donald Trump. We are broadcasting currently to YouTube as well as Twitch. Before we get into this, it would be awesome if you could be sure to like the video as well as make sure to subscribe to this channel if you have not done so yet. Additionally, if you can click the link below and go and follow this channel over on Twitch, that'd be awesome. We're trying to get up to 50 followers to make affiliate status. We're up to 20 now, growing every day. Let's keep the momentum up. And additionally, if you want to directly contribute to this channel, you can go over to patreon.com/superpowerbroadcasting and directly support my work over there. With all that being said, we're going to get into the substance of tonight's panel. So the Lincoln Project, a group of, non-Trumpist Republicans who are dissatisfied with the direction that Donald Trump has been leading America, have been, putting out ads that are very strong, very powerful, very forceful, and vehemently opposed to basically the administration of Donald Trump. And the latest ad by the Lincoln Project, it's titled "Mourning in America," being, mourning is in to mourn over one's death, right? Someone's death. That's, of course, a play on words of Ronald Reagan's ad, Mourning in America, from 1984. So I thought it was very clever in that sense because, of course, Donald Trump, he jacked Ronald Reagan's campaign slogan, Make America Great Again. And so now the neocon side of the Republican Party is, also borrowing from Reagan's legacy to undermine Trump's, style of leadership and whatnot. And with that, we're going to go to the panel here, and then we're going to watch the Lincoln Project's 1 minute ad against the president. But first, before we begin with that, we welcome here Jaeger DePedo, Anthony Roberto. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing good. Gyms are open.
All right.
Gyms are open, man. Oh man, yeah, it's pretty risky. Pretty scary stuff. I mean,
they open for us.
Sometimes you got to risk it for the biscuit.
From now, or another week, I think.
Oh,
I think it's at least 10 days for us. So not too long until the gym's open for us.
Yeah, where I'm at over here on the West Coast in Canada, we're looking at May 15th is when things are going to start opening up. And realistically speaking, given the way that Canada is being going, especially Western Canada, it'll probably be fine. It'll probably be fine after, a month, closer to 2 months of lockdown, essentially on most sectors of the economy. We've had a lot of problems over in Quebec, especially more in Ontario as well. But as far as how the West Coast has handled it, despite a lot of people being stupid, we've kind of gotten lucky. The same can't be said for the United States, for a lot of the United States. New York obviously messed up. Texas, Georgia, Florida are going in a similar direction now. It's kind of a mess, total mess. And of course, that's the context in which the Lincoln Project is running this advertisement here, criticizing the American president. And so with that, we are going to just watch this video here. It's a 1 minute video. Thank you. We got 7 people with us already. So here we go.
There's mourning in America. Today, more than 60,000 Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored. With the economy in shambles, more than 26 million Americans are out of work, the worst economy in decades. Trump bailed out Wall Street, but not Main Street. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment. And with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in America, and under the leadership of Donald Trump, our country is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
Paid for by the Lincoln Project, which is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, that's a very recent ad, and you see they're talking about over 60,000 Americans, and now, of course, it's 70,000 is the death toll, over 70,000, and so things are going to get a lot worse. Trump administration projections now have it at around what I've seen is well over 100,000 people dead by June. That's probably a low ball. I think in those earlier estimates that had initially kind of indicated a death toll in the range over 200,000, those are probably more appropriate to what's going to happen at this rate with the way that the southern governments especially have been handling it. And so what did you guys make of that ad there?
Are we sure it wasn't done by
I'll
the Bernie
say that,
Sanders campaign?
It wasn't like anything crazy. I mean, compared to like the Democrats put out way like feistier ads, like, you know, like really like more spicy stuff against Trump. Like this was kind of like a low ball for Trump. I mean, if you think this is bad, then like you gotta really see what other people put out there. You know, it's like, I mean, I understand like the Rhino. Well, I guess maybe not the Rhino Republicans, but I guess like the establishment Republicans. I get that they have to be more lighthearted on this, but it's like if Trump can't even take this, then how is he going to take like really far left criticism? You know, I just find it kind of weird. And you know, I think, I mean, it really is serious. I mean, we've lost 60,000 Americans. I mean, more Americans than, you know, in other conflicts, and it's such a very small span of time. You know, I mean, we've had the first death was somewhere in January, and now we're in April. So okay, so roughly 4 months. I mean, within 4 months, we've lost a lot of people, more people than the normal flu by far, by double at least. So
By double, yeah.
I mean, well, because the thing is, I think we lose between 30,000-40,000 a year from the flu.
Yeah.
And we're over 60,000. So the people still saying like this is the flu, like you're completely delusional. Like you're beyond hope at this point. Like to anyone who still thinks that.
We've got COVID skeptics out there shouting about how it's a hoax and stuff. And so, like, you got a death toll right now that just passed 70,000. And of course, you're right to mention that the first death in America, I'm not 100% sure when it was. January sounds about right, but of course,
I think it was like the end of January, like January 28th was the first confirmed death, I think.
But almost all of those deaths, though, of the 70,000 happened between the middle of March and now. So about 45 days, 70,000 deaths approximately. Like it's only a few hundred for the first 50% or so because of the exponential nature of it. And so you basically have about 30,000 people dying from the flu in a year. And now in the last, what is that, like 2.5 weeks, you had 30,000 people die from this. So
right. Well, I would say the other thing too, right, is that there was that video that I think I showed you guys in a couple of group chats where there was that guy and there's that lady that was saying that like Trump is being hijacked by his own like team. Because so apparently some of these people, I mean, they're really crazy, like MAGA supporters, they're saying that like Trump's own coronavirus team has hijacked the Trump movement. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like some of these people are so off the deep end in these protests. I mean, you really got to see it. I mean, it's insane because it's like, wait a second. So the people that Trump appointed himself, those people are now like controlled opposition. Like, are you serious?
Oh
like,
yeah, Q told him.
I mean, these people are crazy. I mean, next thing you know, they're gonna say Mike Pence is controlled opposition. I mean, these people are unhinged.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the things too that I hear and I see a lot on Twitter is like, well, somebody else had like pneumonia or they had this other disease and they contracted COVID and they killed them. They're like, well, they're counting all these deaths underneath COVID. And I'm like, well, as they should, because you would have normally survived if you didn't get COVID. So COVID's contributing to that death. What's that? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, they're one of the arguments like, well, these other people, they had a a pneumonia or they had another diabetes or something and then got COVID and it killed them. Well, COVID's the cost of or the cause of that death
Yep.
because they would have normally survived if they hadn't got COVID. So it's some of this misinformation that's going around with the virus, and they're saying, well, they're counting all these deaths to COVID. Well, if you have COVID and it's the thing that put you over the top and killed you, then it's the contributing factor to your death.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the way that some of these so-called COVID skeptics talk about it, you would get the impression from them that if somebody, I don't know, breaks their leg and dies of bleeding or something, that they'll count it as a death from COVID, which of course isn't true. They're just full of crap. A lot of these people, and the thing about this is like obviously, if Hillary Clinton was president right now, a lot of Americans would be dead from the virus. But the point that the Lincoln Project's making is that the mismanagement, the lack of seriousness, the delays, the procrastination, the mixed messages, the inconsistent policies, so on and so forth, the flip flopping, all this inconsistent approach to handling it was a resultant in exacerbating the extent of the pandemic within the United States. I mean, it's very possible that if Hillary Clinton was president with somebody as professional and non-populist as her, who would have surrounded herself by experts and given autonomy to them to act on it, that you could have a death toll that might be like 30,000 right now or less. Like, you know, you could save tens of thousands of people having improper commander in chief is kind of the point that they're making here, right? So,
Well, I would actually say it would probably be a little bit worse under Hillary Clinton for this aspect. So a bunch of the right wing states now are saying, well, we're going to protest, we're going to do this. Could you imagine what they would do if it was Hillary Clinton shutting down the economy? It'd be even worse. It would be a left wing conspiracy. They'd go out in far further numbers because Hillary Clinton's trying to crash the economy because of the globalist. Like
uh,
it's like I think it, you know, her what she would do as far as the public health thing would be a lot better response. But then you have to take into account all the protests that are going on when Trump is president. It would be double if Clinton was president.
yeah, well, that's interesting. I think that in states like you know, New York and whatnot, and some of these other blue states where it got very bad, if there was a coherent approach from the White House that things could have been more streamlined in a way to make it to make things more prepared. But that's a good point. That's a good point, though, that the red states would have resisted federal direction a lot more if there was a Democrat in power, for sure. I think you know that's something I didn't really consider there. That's an interesting argument, but by the same, but you know, as it relates to this ad and everything, of course, the people behind the Lincoln Project, they would have hoped that somebody like Jeb Bush had become president, right? They're not fans of Hillary Clinton. Like it's like people like, you know, Bill Kristol and stuff. I mean, sure they voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, but their first picks were Republican, right? So in the primaries.
Yeah, and it's all probably hearsay, but that's just my kind of viewpoint saying,
Mhm.
well, some people are so incredibly anti Democrat on the right side of things because I've lived in right leaning states for most of my life that some people are so far against that that everything becomes a left wing conspiracy, or they're more apt to protest against somebody on the left than rather than Donald Trump. They'll sit at home and they'll complain, Donald Trump should do this, he should open it up. But if it was somebody on the left hand side of things, they would be more likely to go out and protest, not
Mhm.
keep the social distancing and that. But like I said, it's anecdotal because it's just from my experience, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I gotcha. On you know, going back to what Anthony had said earlier on in the program tonight, you had mentioned, Anthony, about how, you know, can you imagine what how Donald Trump would react if there was a Democrat sort of advertisement running against him, because you were making the point that it would be even more forceful and whatnot. And I'm not necessarily sure how much I agree with that, because Democrats also tend to be more polite and more restrained and whatnot, generally speaking, at least mainstream, more establishment Democrats, whereas Republicans, by and large, tend to be more aggressive when it comes to these sorts of things. I thought that the ad itself was pretty powerful. I thought that the way that, you know, they also were able to borrow from Reagan's legacy to undermine Trump. I thought that that was smart, because of course Trump did the whole MAGA thing. I mean, but it is a good point though, that if Donald Trump got that triggered by this, I mean, how is he going to handle Democratic campaigns during the general election coming up? We're going to go to Donald Trump's response here, and it's there's a helicopter in the background. He's on a tarmac, so it's kind of loud. Just be warned about that, just to kind of adjust your volume and everything. This is the clip of Trump speaking. It's a couple minutes long and very immature, very childish response to the ad. So here we go.
Do you want to make any comment about this Lincoln Project ad that aired? You tweeted about it overnight.
Yeah, no, I saw it.
Mourning in America.
Yeah, I saw a project, a thing called the Lincoln Project, and I would have them change the name to the Losers Project, because if you take a look at Schmidt, it's George Conway. The guy Kellyanne must have done a big number on him. But it's George Conway and it's some other people, Weaver. Every one of them I either defeated or they lost by themselves. But it's a group of major losers. They're Republican losers. And if they would really think about it, I have 252 beautiful, brand new, conservative, wonderful judges, 2 Supreme Court judges that are great. We produced the greatest economy in history until a month and a half ago, when we got hit by the virus, so we had to close it down, and we'll do it again. We've rebuilt our military. We've done things that nobody has been able to do. I've gotten the greatest tax cuts in history, in the history of our country, the biggest tax cuts. The Democrats want to raise your taxes. I've gotten regulation cuts, the biggest in the history of our country, no matter how long a president served. With all of that, I guess they don't like me, but let me just tell you, these are losers from day one. Guys like Bill Kristol, he's 0-32. George Conway, you take a look at him. Just take a look at that guy. The man's a stone-cold loser. So they should not call it the Lincoln Project. It's not fair to Abraham Lincoln, a great president. They should call it the Losers Project. Okay, thanks.
The Losers Project? How creative.
Oh, now he's going after Bill Kristol. Now he's going after the neocons. He wants to boost his paleocon support. He wants to kick out all the neocons. I mean, it seems like that's his goal. He doesn't want them in the party anymore.
Yeah.
He wants the party of the dear leader, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. He calls them the Losers Project. The Losers Project, as if any of these people that he's describing there are losers. I mean, I know, his fans will say, well, he's the president of the United States. He's the biggest winner in America. But you got to keep in mind, he started by inheriting about $430 million. If he had simply just invested that in mutual funds, or whatever, he'd have like $10 billion today. Instead, I'm convinced he's got a negative net worth because he's just been rolling on credit the whole time. He bankrupted a casino. He's bankrupted Trump Airlines, bankrupted Trump Steaks. It goes on and on and on. I mean, we watched the Trump Steaks commercial on this program before. The guy's a goofball. He's admitted, his son's admitted as well, that they've gotten financing through Russia, so to build golf courses and everything else. He gives the appearance of wealth, but it's founded on Russian credit at the end of the day. He calls himself a billionaire, but I'm skeptical about that. The only way that he might be a billionaire is if it's in the red. It's definitely not in the black. And yet all these guys that he's accusing basically of being losers is like, it's funny, man. A part of it comes across as projection because he always walks around with insecurity. He wants to show that he's the best, he's the greatest, all this sort of stuff, because he knows that the only reason why he got a degree from Wharton was because his dad got him in. He knows he's not too bright, so he tries to come across as like this big genius or whatever. And the way that he talked about the neocons there and the associated people over at the Lincoln Project about how, well, you know, I got 252 judges on, I got 2 Supreme Court judges on, so what now? It's like, yeah, but if any of those guys were president, they also would have appointed conservative judges, and they also would have appointed Republicans to the Supreme Court. So it's like, it's kind of a non-argument. Like, what is he insinuating? Is he insinuating that Bill Kristol would have appointed what, like Bernie Sanders to the Supreme Court or something? Like,
You know, there's a Fox News segment that came out a couple months ago when John Bolton wanted to testify, and I think Tucker Carlson, he said something along the lines, or was it Sean Hannity? I can't remember, but one of their special programs on Fox, it literally had the screen cap of John Bolton is co-opted by the Democrats, like quite literally. It's like, dude, you guys promoted John Bolton on the Fox network forever, and now you're saying he's a Democratic host because he wants to speak out against Trump. Are you guys insane? This dude's been a Republican voter forever. Now you guys think he's being like co-opted by Nancy Pelosi or some shit. I mean, these people are like QAnon conspiracy theorists. I mean, these people are insane.
That's hilarious to me, because of course, like anybody who's on Twitter, anybody who pays attention to politics would know that Democrats, mostly left-leaning people, especially non-interventionist left-wingers, think of John Bolton as a far-right neocon war hawk, basically. But to the folks at Fox now, ever since Trump consolidated power, oh, he must be a Democrat. It's like, what? I mean, John Bolton doesn't like the Democrats. It's the same with like a lot of those guys in the Lincoln Project. Like, I understand why Trump wants to brand them as like Democrats and communists and stuff, but it's like they're Republicans. They're more standard Republican than Trump ever was. Trump's a guy who used to give money to both sides, of course. And now, you know, he ran as a Republican because he realized that he was basically, you know, a billionaire or whatever. So he wouldn't be welcomed in the Democratic Party. So he ran as a Republican. He doesn't really have much in common with what Republicans used to stand for on Fox News and in the RNC or in the GOP at large. I mean, because the Republican Party up until 2015 or so was a party of, well, you know what, you know, strong borders but legal immigration, obviously strong defense, you know, generally advocating for U.S. involvement in the world, military intervention, economic liberalism, basically, you know. And of course, Donald Trump did do tax cuts and whatnot, but he also pursued protectionism in other areas. And of course, one of the big aspects of the Republican Party was like social conservatism and everything. And of course, Trump appeals to that stuff. He pays lip service to that stuff. But at the end of the day, he's like a guy who goes around sleeping with porn stars and having, you know, abortions and all this stuff paid for them and all this. It's like he's not somebody that you would really think that a lot of the base of the Republican Party would get behind. But you know, things change. So that's what populism did. So,
and you have to own the libs. That's all.
Yeah,
that's
with
what it's
own
all
the
about. That's what it's all about. You just have to own the libs. Doesn't matter what you do. You just have to own the libs.
I mean, for most of Trump's life, of course, he was a social liberal as well, and now, of course, he's gone in like a very staunchly anti-immigrant direction. But I mean, he's even gone in a direction where like he wants to curtail legal immigration as well. The kind of stuff that the Republican Party didn't really used to stand for a long time. I find a lot of this rhetoric from Trump to just be, you know, it's kind of interesting how for a lot of the people that support him, they are going to let him kind of redefine the party in that sense. But I think it really comes down to how he does in November, because if he's able to say win, he doesn't even have to win by very much. He could win by one vote in one of the swing states, and they'd be like, legitimate victory, and fair is fair. He win the electoral college. In that case, then he gets to be a two-term president. Yeah, I think at that point, yeah, it's worrying because then you could say, well, now it sets up a case for where his family can run and kind of consolidate the party around this populist right agenda. But if he fails, if he fails and Joe Biden takes over, though, I think the Republicans are going to go back to the folks over at the Lincoln Project. I think that it'll go back to the neocons in 2024, 2028. So
what's so crazy that it's like, imagine like wanting to get approval from Tuck the Cuck. I mean, seriously, like that's the guy that you want to get approval from. Like, you don't care about like anyone else. Like you want to make sure that you have a good footing on like those cringy paleocon shows. Like, that's your base. These are the losers you want to have on. These are the people you want to get appraisal from. Like, these people are awful.
He thinks they're winners. Like, that's the thing you gotta keep in mind here. Donald Trump thinks that people like Steve Bannon, people like Seb Gorka, people like Pat Buchanan, these kinds of people are winners. He thinks people like Bill Kristol, people like Jeb Bush are losers and whatnot. And it's like, well, it is kind of interesting because on the one hand, I mean, yeah, he can claim, well, I became president and all of this, but it's like almost all of Donald Trump's sort of image is fake. It's all dead. It's all financed. It's all, it's all over the top, cheap gold, that sort of stuff to try to look rich, to try to give this impression of wealth. He tries to give off this impression of intelligence, but of course, I mean, we can go through the videos. He doesn't know how like bleach works. He doesn't understand that if something can kill bacteria or a virus on a surface, that it's not a smart idea to literally inject it into your body. He doesn't understand any of that. He on the other hand, he'll call other people dumb. He'll call them losers. To me, it comes across as projection that he has insecurity. I mean, we all know that he looks up to leaders like Kim and Xi and Putin, which is funny because it's like the U.S. president didn't really used to look up to anybody. They were the top dog, It's not like Reagan ever looked up to anybody. It's not like George W. Bush ever looked up to anybody. Like they were at the top. Whereas Donald Trump, he's at the top, but he feels like, oh man, I want to be like Kim someday. Like, how sad.
I also feel like if Reagan was alive today, I don't think he would be voting for Trump, though. I mean, maybe, but like, I don't know. I don't think Ronald Reagan would really approve of some of the stuff that Trump has done, especially meeting with Putin and giving him, all this stuff. And I mean, it's super cringe. I mean, he said, he trusts Putin over the CIA. I mean, this is some cringy stuff that back in the 80s you'd be lashed for. You'd be, people would speak out against you. But now it's cool. It is cool to think that, like Russia is like TradCon and all this crap.
Yep.
I mean, this is a joke. This is a joke.
Oh, absolutely. I think that if Ronald Reagan were around today and he were going to be voting in the election coming up, I think what he would do is he'd very seriously weigh how Donald Trump would appoint a conservative to the Supreme Court, and he would support Trump on that. But on everything else, he'd probably back Joe Biden. And realistically speaking, that's tough because, of course, he's really a socially conservative guy. But I think he'd be able to see through Trump's BS. And I think at the end of the day, he would say that Joe Biden had more integrity than Donald Trump and go with him. So, I mean, a lot of the, obviously the never Trumper Republicans who were supportive of Reagan, they voted for Hillary Clinton. So, that's my view. What do you think, Jaeger?
I think it'd be tough to compare kind of the modern world to the way the world was back then. But I think with Reagan on foreign policy, you definitely agree with the Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden over Donald Trump. But on social issues, I think he'd be more inclined to agree with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So he could probably go either way, but I imagine in 2016 he would have voted for Clinton. But I think in 2020 he would be leaning more towards Trump as far as that, because Trump was such a different conservative running in 2016 than all the other traditional ones. Because you went from John McCain to Mitt Romney to Donald Trump, so he's a lot different than the two previous candidates that you
Yeah.
had there. So I think 2016 probably Hillary Clinton, and then in this year he would probably be leaning more towards Trump on things, even though you disagree on foreign policy.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough hypothetical, because it also assumes that then Ronald Reagan would have been alive through 2016. He would have endorsed somebody like Jeb Bush, and then Donald Trump probably would have lost the primaries. And so it's the sort of thing that we can only really speculate on that. We have the gun shark in the chat telling me right now that he doesn't buy the argument, though. He says that Reagan was friends with Phyllis Schlafly and other paleocons, and that's true. The Reagan administration was an interesting blend of like neoliberal folks, neoconservative folks, and then paleoconservative folks. It was a big tent sort of administration in that sense. I think though that at the end of the day, Reagan was deeply socially conservative, and that's what appealed to him with the paleocons. But on foreign policy, he was a strong believer in American hegemony. And so in that sense, he had more in common with the neocons. And then on economics, he was pretty neoliberal. I think that, and as the Slugman on Twitch is saying right here, the Slugman's saying that Reagan would have had an aneurysm after Helsinki if he were still alive. See, that's the thing. At the end of the day, we can have debates over if you're liberal, conservative, all this sort of stuff. But like Donald Trump is working for on behalf of the Russians at that point. He said that he trusted the KGB over the CIA. So it's hard for me to imagine Ronald Reagan endorsing somebody who would say that, but because Reagan was just such a strong anti-communist. But
okay.
But yeah, let's see.
Well, I think the other thing, if I could just speak real quick, is I think as far as like Reagan goes, like I feel like it is a tough one, because I think it is kind of divided. Like it's not so clear cut of like, oh, okay, he would have voted for this or this. But I feel like with a lot of the foreign policy decisions that he has made, and all this conceding to Russia in different parts of the world, especially like in Venezuela and stuff like that, like I really feel like Ronald Reagan would be very, very deeply angry about this. It's like I don't think he would let that go. I mean, he's literally allowing Putin to really take a foothold in other parts of the world. And I think that's very deeply concerning. It's like, yeah, sure, like as far as like the Democrats are, of course they're more socially liberal though, but it's like, would he really take that over? Like losing hegemony against Russia and China? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like, just to go back to what the gun shark was talking about. It's like Reagan was with the paleocons on the domestic agenda, but on the foreign policy agenda, like all the guys at the Lincoln Project, they're on his side of it. So I would think that in this context, he probably would say, at the end of the day, you have to vote for Joe Biden, because Joe Biden's standing up for America on the world stage. And if America loses on the world stage, then it doesn't matter if you have a liberal or conservative, because you don't have a country anymore. So,
Well, I think the other thing too is that it's like, when it comes to paleocons in the 80s, I don't know if they were more hardcore isolationists as they are now. Because, like, I mean, since Bush, they've been even more hardcore, like, anti-interventionist. I mean, they're openly anti-interventionist, to such a degree where it's like, I don't know if the paleocons were as anti-interventionist in the 80s. Could they tolerate it? Because it's like the paleocons now, they can't really tolerate like any kind of intervention.
Right.
Like they deeply criticize like Trump destroying empty air bases in Syria. The paleocons of the 80s, I think they could probably tolerate that though. Nowadays, I mean, if Trump like literally pulls the chef out of Somalia into Somalia, whatever, like everyone goes crazy. Like these paleocons are deeply, deeply anti-interventionist. So it's like, you have to look at the context of like paleocons in the 80s and now.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like there were paleocons back then that were deeply anti-interventionist. Obviously, people like Buchanan and stuff, but the difference was they rallied around Reagan because he was the leader, and of course, Reagan's foreign policy was more with the neocons and everything. But more importantly, though, the paleocons back then were staunchly anti-communist, and so they could also kind of see Reagan having a really strong approach on the Soviet Union, even if they were more anti-interventionist. Whereas today, the paleocons see themselves as having more in common with the Russians now. Like the paleocons back then were more isolationist, but they still recognize the Soviets as an enemy. Whereas now it's like you look at these guys like Gorka, you look at these guys like Bannon and stuff, and they really see Putin as like their friend. They see America as the bad guy. So the old paleocons, I don't agree with them, but at least they were pro-American in that sense. The new paleocons are outright pro-Russian. So
Right. Well, just look at like, the different types of paleocons that are like up right now. I mean, like the types of people that, that came into TPUSA or even at other conservative events that argue, they even outwardly say that Russia is not our enemy. It's our friend. I mean, even Tucker says that. Tuck the Cuck says that Russia's our friend. I mean, it's like, dude, like, wait, what? Like these people, like, they don't even deny it anymore. They just think it's cool. And I don't think the paleocons of the 80s would have said that like openly.
yeah, no, that's the thing. And I just want to take this opportunity here just to let everybody know who's watching right now. Be sure to go over and follow Anthony Roberto over on Twitter. I just prepared a Chiron before we went live right here so you can see he's at Global Affairs. And then also be sure to follow Jaeger de Pedo. You are Jaeger of Pedo over on Twitter. But I didn't get to prepare Chiron for you because you came on a bit later. But with respect to all of that, yeah, these guys are really interesting, and you can keep up with them on Twitter. I know Anthony, for example, you put out a lot of foreign policy content and everything. It's it's the sort of stuff that I think a lot of the people that watch this program would be interested in following you, especially. And then yeah, it's the sort of thing that just kind of going back to what we were discussing about the paleocons and everything. See, that's the thing. That's the thing is it's like there are conservatives still that don't think that the Russians are the good guys. They want to make America conservative, or they want to preserve American conservatism within America. But they're not with the paleocons anymore. Like what it means to be a paleocon these days is like you're basically, I mean, I've seen all their memes and stuff. It's talking about how like Russia is basically our savior. It's seditious level cringe, man. I mean, it's the sort of thing that back in the day, the old school paleocons and stuff that were under Reagan, they had three incentives rather to really kind of get behind him. The first was the Republican Party follows the leader, and Reagan was the leader. So they weren't going to isolate themselves from the party. They basically had to suck it up and back a guy who was working with the neocons. And the second is they were staunchly anti-communist. So they could deal with having an aggressive foreign policy towards the Soviet Union. And the third one was they weren't treasonous. You could disagree with them on a bunch of different stuff, but they weren't going to sell America to a foreign rival, right? Whereas the modern paleocons, they basically take pride in being seditious. They're like, oh yeah, I'd rather be seditious than be degenerate, basically, which is ironic because if you're a traitor, you are degenerate. So
Yeah, and as far as this comment you got about Tucker Carlson, yeah, he loves big government, and he loves Tulsi Gabbard too.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as these big government ideas, he's kind of off the deep end of what conservatives used to be, because he's for big government, he's for big ideas. He is for limited immigration as far as that, but yeah, he's probably closer along the lines to a Tulsi Gabbard than he is to a Ronald Reagan type of conservative.
Yeah. No, that whole thing about Tucker Carlson, I mean, he has on many occasions before given praise to not just Elizabeth Warren, but also Bernie Sanders, which is like, I mean, in many ways, he does have more in common with Bernie. You know, they're both populists, obviously. They both are isolationists. They both see Russia in with rose-eyed glasses. They both largely get behind the idea of nationalization and stuff like that. Tucker Carlson, I mean, he's really gone in a very weird direction. He used to basically be a pal with the neocons, and now like Bill Kristol's like living rent free in his head. He always talks about these guys as like warmonger neocons and everything, and he can't stop talking about them. And it's funny because it's like objectively speaking, Donald Trump is the guy with the power now. But if you were to just listen to them and how much they get infuriated and whine and cry, you would think that people like Bill Kristol and Jeb Bush were in power today, right? So,
well, I think the other thing too is when it comes to people like Talk, like he's not. The thing is, he's pretty much like a full blown tanky, like
yes.
He's an asshole, like just openly, and like the thing is like. At least with like the older kind of conservatives, like the Pat Buchanan, at least he tried to like hide that more in the 90s when he was running for president. But it's like now it's like, oh no, that's cool. It's cool to be the Nazbol. It's cool to have National Socialism. Get rid of the degeneracy. Let's red pill everybody. The neocons are Democrats. Like these people have really changed the tone, like more like overtly.
Yeah. No, that the gun shark is just saying in the chat, paleocons are basically the alt-right now. And yeah, that's the thing. The old school paleocons weren't alt-right. They were just traditional American conservatives. And now they're like, they want to be straight up national socialists, fascists that are cool with communists, basically. So, and they'll even tell you that they have more in common with like Bernie Sanders and Chapo than they do with the mainstream of the Republican Party. So I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Republican Party evolves if Trump loses or even if Trump wins, because it could go in either direction. It's pretty malleable. There's just a few issues you have to be on the right side now. Abortion would be one of the biggest issues. Guns would be another one, especially with the rhetoric coming from the Democrats. But other than that, they can go either way in foreign policy. Immigration, probably, if Trump continues to win, you're probably going to have to be more along Trump's lines and less free market when it comes to immigration. So this election will be extremely interesting to see where different people go if Trump wins or if Trump loses.
Yeah, so I'm back now. The Slugman's writing here. He says, "I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat." Do you guys remember that T-shirt? And I vaguely remember that some Trump supporter actually wore that as like a badge of pride that you'd rather work with the enemy than be in the other party in your own country. I mean, talk about divisiveness. Oh man.
So can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I just noticed in the private chat that Anthony said he couldn't. So it might be a connection issue on your end, Anthony. But I can hear Jaeger. I guess the question though then is, can the audience hear Jaeger as well? Let's see. Yeah, Anthony, try rejoining. That might reset the audio synchronicity. So. Yeah, so we'll have Anthony back in a moment. Well, I like this comment here from Elongated Musk on YouTube. He says, "Don't tell them," referring to the paleocons now, "that Russia has one of the highest abortion rates in the world." Yeah, see, that's the other thing that's so funny about all this is like Russia's a very, very non-religious society. Only about 3% of the country attends church once a month or more, whereas it's over 30% in America. They also have 15% of their population are Muslims. I thought that the alt-right and stuff were opposed to that.
Well-
and then they always talk about how, there's a few percent of Europe that's Muslim now. And it's like, yeah, but Russia's 15%. And then additionally, they're run by, they're the most self-centered, nihilistic sort of leadership that's basically drawn from the communist KGB and thuggery that only stand for their own personal enrichment. Yet that stuff that appeals. That they are the darlings of the paleocons here now. Apparently, that's their idea of social conservatism now. So, it's like,
Yeah, I don't think they understand all that goes on in Russia. They just, kind of along the lines of war bad. We don't want to go to war. We have other things to deal with here.
yeah,
And so they don't understand, as far as how bad Russia is as a country and also their influence around the world. They just don't want to see a war.
and that's the thing.
Interesting.
Yep.
Oh, you know what's interesting? It's like if Trump actually visited Iran somehow, he'd probably actually like them, right? Because Iran is socially conservative. There's a supreme leader. Everyone follows the rules. It's like, yeah, like what's the difference? Like with all these paleocons, why don't you just go over to Iran? Why don't you just go over to China or North Korea? It's what you want. It's socially conservative. A lot of the economy is controlled by the government. Like, why not? Just do it. Like, if you think the U.S. is too degenerate, just leave. Like that's my answer.
Well, that's the other thing though. When it comes to this stuff, is that the alt-right, a lot of these paleocon types, even the guys that are like in their 40s and 50s that you think would know better and do the research, all that they know of Russia is just they see Putin's speeches and they see the memes of him as like this Catholic crusader or whatever, which is funny because like he's Eastern Orthodox, but it's like you see all this stuff and they have this romanticized image in their head of Russia as like this beacon of Christendom. And you're like, yeah, but they're a far more atheistic country than America is. It's always funny to me how it's like these people, they're willing to work with the enemy because they have some disagreements with like the establishment in their own country. When in reality, it's like if you cared about, living in a place that was more Christian, if you cared about, that sort of stuff, you would say that America was 10 times more faithful than Russia. And that'd be objectively true. It's like these people see that as a good thing, and yet they side with Russia. So all they know are like these memes and stuff. They don't really understand how degenerate Russia is from their own point of view. If they were to actually go over there and step outside the state-sponsored tour or whatever of the Kremlin and stuff, they'd see a country that's living in deep poverty, deep nihilism, deep social chaos. And they would, I would hope, recognize that, oh crap, the only people in this country that seem faithful at all are Muslims, basically, at the end of the day. I mean, even the whole Putin thing about being a Christian, that was mostly a cynical ploy to ingratiate himself to the Russian Orthodox Church as a way to consolidate power, but also as a way to get more like ceremonies and titles and stuff, and give this idea of like, well, we're standing for something or whatever because he's got nothing else to offer the people. And a lot of Russians, even though they're atheist or even though they're like they don't attend church or whatever, they will wear stuff like Orthodox crosses and things on their necklaces and whatnot. They'll do that as a symbol of just being ethnically Russian. It's not really a religious thing for them. And so to align with the church, at least officially or whatever, is more of like an ethnic thing than it is a religious thing in that sense. But this stuff to them, to these people in the West, it's like, I mean, they look at that and they think it's, I guess, based or whatever. And then they look at America and they think it's degenerate, even though America is like one of the most, well, as far as the industrial countries and stuff go, one of the ones with the highest religiosity, right? So it's just kind of funny, So,
Well,
but they think,
and,
they think
and,
America
and,
is,
and I think the other thing too, when it speaks to Donald Trump, is that it's like when it comes to the Trump administration and some of his supporters, well, maybe more than not, that like he wants to take time to actually ban transgender people out of the military. Like he's willing to like do that kind of work, but he doesn't want to like help our troops in Syria. He doesn't want to help our troops in Afghanistan. He wants to reduce our role. I mean, like the thing is, like ISIS is picking back up, and we're pulling troops. We're shaking the hands. We're leaving. We're calling it a good night. But Trump, Trump wants, if he sees like a transgender person, he wants that gone. But ISIS, who cares, right? Like his priorities are so stupid.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the other thing that I guess should be mentioned about this though is that it's funny. Like a lot of the alt right people are, if you really grill them on it, they'll say that they're like culturally Christian, or they'll straight up say that they're atheist or whatever, but that they want an official theocracy because they think it'll get rid of degeneracy or whatever. It's just they're a really cognitively dissonant type of group of people, right? At the end of the day, and and it's an interesting thing because America is more socially liberal than Russia in many ways, but it's also more religious than Russia in other parts of the country, whereas Russia is socially conservative, but it's more atheistic, as a legacy of the Soviet Union for the most part. And and one thing that they like about Russia, though, is that they see Russia as, I guess, being red pilled on homosexuality. Like they'll torture and murder gays and everything over there. But that's not even so much a religious thing as it is like an ethnic and cultural sort of legacy that Russia's always been homophobic and whatnot. Whereas in America, they see as like moving away from homophobia and moving away from a lot of these sorts of things. And so they want to go and basically be like Russia, but none of them actually have the balls to move over there. That's the other thing that's so annoying is like we're constantly plagued by these idiots living here, and they refuse to get out. But they always talk about how Russia is the savior and all this stuff. It's like they should just move. Like what are they doing here? They don't have any Western values. Like, you know.
Yeah, they can move out and we can take in some more South Koreans, some more Filipinos, and get some people that are educated and ready to work.
Oh yeah. No, for sure.
That's one of the crazy things. You look at the immigration issue is like Mexico, they can just hop over the border. But if you're like in the Philippines and you want to come over to America, like you have to have a job there in the Philippines and they have to sign like a letter of recommendation for you to get a visa to even come over and do tourism in America. Because I've had so many people stay over. And some of those people, they're highly educated, pharmacists, doctors, and stuff like that. They could work well in the American system. So if we can replace some of these idiots and throw them over to Russia and take in some more people who would be beneficial to society, that would be 100% great.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And one thing I've always said that it's like, if we have like people that are like, like civil engineers or like, scientists or whatever, if they come from like Iran or China or Russia, I think that's a good thing because they shouldn't have those. We should have those. We should always have more productive, like civilians in society, people. So it's like, yeah, like if they want to leave, then yeah, like we could take them because it's like they, like they shouldn't have them because like how Yeager said, like they have a better job, they have better pay here. It's like if you're going to be an architect in Iran, it's way better to be an architect in the US. You get paid more. It's more capitalistic. Yeah, of course. You have way more opportunities. And I can see why people overstay their visas, of course.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the thing. The United States is obviously a lot more economically prosperous than Russia too. The state of New York has a bigger economy than Russia does as a whole, and Russia, of course, is the largest country in the world. It's kind of embarrassing because you think about it, Russia could be very wealthy, but they choose to go in a direction of tyranny for 1,000 years, basically, and it sucks. Well, we have the gun shark responding to Jaeger in the chat. He says over on YouTube, he says, in a strange way, the paleocons are latching on to a real issue, though. Extremism is a situational ideology. that usually takes root in economic deprivation. Yeah, what's interesting about that is that the United States, right up until this coronavirus pandemic emerged, the United States was living in the most prosperous era in human history, essentially. So it is interesting to see a lot of this extremism and stuff arise, even though, let's keep it real, this is the best time to be alive. Even if you're poor, you have access to better technology than ever, higher purchasing power than almost ever. You've got a better standard of living, but everybody likes to complain about the boomers because they saved up money, basically. So, you know.
Oh yeah, they grew up in a different time too. Because I remember my grandma grew up during the Great Depression, and she
Hmm.
was the biggest hoarder I've ever seen in my life. Because when she was growing up, she had nothing. Because
Yeah.
she grew up right during that period, and a lot of the boomers grew up during the period where there wasn't great prosperity. And now they live in a time when there is, but they're still acting like it's a time when there wasn't. So it'll be interesting moving forward with all the different generational dynamics and as they grow up and as they get into the workforce and as they exit the workforce.
Yeah, no, that's a good point though about how, the boomers and whatnot were really informed by a great predominant scarcity that they knew growing up, whereas for millennials, zoomers, we've only known prosperity. And so for us, even small inconveniences seem like the end of the world. I often talk about on this channel how, like, people that are like fans of Hassan Piker and stuff, they'll literally side with North Korea to own our establishment because they're upset they like have to work at McDonald's or something. And you're like, yeah, but a McDonald's worker in America has a better standard of living by far than a party boss does in North Korea. I mean, most party bosses in North Korea don't even have access to a car. Whereas, in America, you can buy like a car for a few $1,000s. And you make a few $1,000s in a couple months. Whereas in North Korea, if you're a top party boss in a regional sort of area or whatnot, you also have to worry about being executed at any point if the leader feels that they want to make an example out of you or whatnot. I put up a poll over on Twitter earlier today. We got about 200 votes right now on it, where I asked, which generation is the most insufferable?
I think it's
38.5% of respondents said boomer. Only 10% said Gen X. 25% said the millennial. 27% said the Zoomer. And what I find interesting about that, of course, is like we don't know the base of people that we're voting on. It's probably mostly millennials and Zoomers. If I had to take a stab at that one, I'd probably say millennials are the most insufferable right now. But what do you guys think?
I think it's the boomers.
Oh man.
I think it's the Zoomers. Can't stand those little shits.
Oh man, we're divided. We have a divided panel. Okay, Anthony, why the boomer?
Because I feel like with boomers, at least the ones that I've talked to when it comes to like electoral stuff, whether it be like, in school or whatnot and outside, it's like I feel like a lot of boomers are not in touch with with a lot of issues like electorally, on a variety of different topics, whether it be like, like the environment and whatnot. Like some of them are still kind of like interventionist in a way, but I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of them kind of will drop that issue over other issues. I feel like though with when it comes to boomers, a lot of them aren't good with technology either. But I mean,
Yeah.
in all seriousness, I think when it comes to them, they see. I think one of the big things that I guess I have a problem with a lot of boomers, at least the more like right wing ones, and I mean I guess also left wing ones too. That it's like they have a big shtick on the whole like, like all on like the more like modern culture, I guess, with Zoomers. Like a lot of them will like complain about rap and stuff like that. Because like I've worked in like, a nursing home before, and like I've just like heard certain things that are just so dumb. It's like, okay, like those are the issues you really like think are bad. like hip hop and stuff like that. Like I've heard some really, but keep in mind, like some of these people I've talked to are like in their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
But it's like, come on, man, like that's really your biggest issue, not like these other things, you know. But like, I mean, but like, the thing is, when it comes to boomers, it's like they come from different like backgrounds and different places and stuff like that. Some of the boomers are really hippie like too. I don't like those ones. So like,
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
guess,
true.
well, the other thing is it also comes to different regions, you know, and like where they come from and whatnot. So that also shapes their perspective. But I just feel like a lot of them are just out of touch, you know?
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. I worked in a senior care home too for a couple years, and a lot of the people there were like either boomers or like silent generation type people, of course, like most of them. And so, uh, it's the sort of thing that, um, generally speaking, boomers tend to be, I guess, in a way, more conservative-ish, except within the context of when they were alive, or well, they're still alive, but when they were like, I guess, our age or whatnot. What it meant to be a liberal was more conservative than what it means to be a liberal today. Like things, like we've gotten to a point now where conservatives today, your average sort of conservative within, say, the center right, is more liberal than a lot of liberals would have been, say,
Oh,
in the 1950s,
there's
60s.
I just remembered my other point real quick before Jaeger goes. I think the other thing when it comes to boomers that really frustrates me is that they really like they have a huge nostalgic for the past, and like when it comes to like a variety of things, like whether it be like crime or education and whatnot, like I would say in a lot of ways the U.S. has really progressed as far as like bringing down crime, bringing up education, be more of like a better leader in the world. Whereas like I feel like a lot of like boomers and whatnot, like they see the past is so much better. Of like, oh, like remember like 1954, it was, you know, it was so great for everybody. Like I think that's what really bothers me about that, like just that like that rosy lens of that era, and they just like want to go back to it.
Hmm.
Because like, you know, like I've just seen that like a lot, like especially if I go like car shows and stuff like that, like there's just too much of that, and I feel like they don't realize like all the different types of problems we had back then. I think that's like another thing to them, like
Yeah.
generally speaking, like whether if they're left or right.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because generally speaking, the set of people that you're going to kind of run into, probably, uh that remember that sort of time period, that they'll generally remember it the way that they and their friends and whatnot kind of experienced it. Things were in some ways more divided back then, along like racial lines, that sort of stuff. But you could argue that in some ways things are more divided now along like economic lines and things like that. It gets kind of tough. But I'm curious about Jaeger, why you would pick the Zoomer there, because like I said, we got a quarter, or no, we had 27% of people pick the Zoomer, but of course the Boomer, almost 39% of people voted with Anthony on that for the Boomer. So
Okay, so first of all, Zoomers are going to be from 1995 till 2010, and they were the generation kind of raised with the participation trophy. So
mhm.
there's no losers, and they're also more likely to read Marx and have the kind of that communistic ideology where everything should be equal, everything should be fair, because they were raised that way because they got their participation trophies. And just so that kind of that mentality where everybody has to be a winner, everybody has to be equal, there's no winners or losers, absolutely makes me go crazy. And I think they're the worst ones. And also the social media aspect. A lot of them are on social media, think they spend an average of, what is it, 11 or trying to, what's the average? So like 25, 30 hours a week on social media sites. And so they're kind of taking themselves out of reality. You're not very good at communicating back and forth because they're always on their phones, always on
Oh,
social
man.
media sites. And the fact that TikTok resists is probably my best argument.
Oh man, I mean, you're talking to somebody right here who's spending like 15 hours a week just on streaming to YouTube and Twitch. Never mind the time I spend on Twitter. I'm kind of sounding like a Zoomer in a way right now. Oh man, it's no, but that's the thing.
Well, well, when you're in company, do you use your phone or can you get off your phone? Like that's one of the things that drives me nuts, you're out to eat somewhere with some people and they just can't put their phone down. Like they're absolutely addicted to it. And like I said, the philosophy where everybody has to be a winner is
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. No, see, that's the thing. It's like I'm somebody who's like, I'm not like one of those winner take all type people. I understand that you can have a non-zero sum system where everybody can prosper in ways, but I've always made a point that I don't really view economic inequality, for example, as that big of a deal so long as everybody's moving up. Like if you say, I don't know, for example, say you make 30,000 a year and then the next year you make 40,000. It's like, do you really care if Bill Gates goes from 70 billion to 90 billion in that year? It's like, well, you're better off, he's better off, everybody wins. But of course, in their view, it's on the one hand, it's everybody has to be a winner, except if you're somebody who started with anything or if you're somebody who has an advantage. It's like it's more ingrained, I think, almost. I feel like with the millennial sort of culture too, there's that participation trophy sort of thing. But the logical conclusion of that is you go from everybody winning prizes to we need to equalize everything and take away stuff from other people. And that's where you see like the communists really kind of arise. And one thing that I kind of like about some Zoomers, at least, I guess this is true for some millennials, is that instead of becoming cringy, contrarian, communists or anarchists or whatever, they're just not political. They just want to play Fortnite and stuff. And honestly, I'd prefer that over somebody who's going to be political and be super cringe and fringe. So, but that's my view. Like I've said before, I'd rather have like a 2% voter turnout and have everybody know what they're talking about than have 100% voter turnout and have everybody just be clueless and just buy into some memes and stuff. So,
But yeah, I guess, it always just depends on the culture and stuff like that. I mean, when the boomers were around, their grandparents weren't all with it, because it's like back in the 50s, for the older generation, they saw rock and roll as degenerate. I mean, like we're always pushing the envelope on that.
yeah.
So like I feel like it's not like the greatest argument. I mean, even for Elvis Presley, they would only show his face or whatever, or like only like the neck and up, because they thought his dancing was considered inappropriate in the early 50s. I mean, of course that's changed, but it's like we're always evolving on like what we consider to be like degenerate over time. So it's like, like 100 years from now, they'll say that the next generation has done something more degenerate than TikTok. So it's like we're always pushing the goalpost on that. And I'd say with boomers, at least some of the ones that come into my work, because I also work at like a grocery store too, part-time, like you, Kevin. And I have to say, like some of the boomers in there that come in, a lot of them are conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And some of them are a bit weird. Like I had this guy who was about, I think he was like in his mid 60s, so a little younger, of course. And he was talking about how like climate change is like controlled by like the elites and all this crap, and he was going on for 5 minutes. Of course I don't say anything because it's like you have to be polite, but it's like
Right.
I've heard a lot of that stuff come out of boomers before. So I mean, like I've heard a couple of things here and there from Gen Z people, but as you said, like a lot of Gen Z people aren't very political, and it's like I'd rather have someone just not be political than someone talk in my face about how like climate change is like not real. It's like it's like you just have to pick of like what is worse in your view, I guess.
Right. I think for me, like one of the reasons why I would say that millennials are not why I would identify millennials there is I think that a lot of this sort of communistic or this resurgent communistic ideology, this anti-Americanism, this anti-interventionism, it really kind of started with the millennial mindset to kind of like spite the boomer. We're gonna, I guess, side with the Russians and Assad and stuff to own the boomers and stuff. And so it's like I understand obviously what you're talking about, Anthony, about the boomers, conspiracism and everything. But on the other hand, you have blatant genocide apologia exercised by the millennials, especially. You got people like Shoe on Head, you got Kremlin Kyle, you got Neckbeard Jimmy, you got all these people. I don't know if Jimmy's a millennial, but his fans are.
I'm pretty
You got
sure
all
he's
these people.
Generation X. I think he's Gen X. I don't
Yeah,
think he's a
Gen
millennial.
X. Yeah, but his fans and stuff, like all the TYT fans are like mostly millennials, and I feel like a lot of these problems that Yeager was talking about, they really kickstarted with the millennial generation. And you could say, well, every generation tries to own the previous generation or whatever, but I feel like Gen X didn't do that in the same way that the millennials did. What do you make of that, Yeager?
Well, it probably depends on what. So if you're like I am, so just kind of looking it up. So my mom was a Gen Xer, and so I was kind of raised a little bit differently. Like there was still competition in sports and that, so I didn't experience that participation trophy while being a millennial. But that seemed to be on the verge, like when I was leaving high school and into college, is when they started the participation trophies. So maybe the tail end of the millennials and into the Generation Z or the Zoomers. But
Yeah.
yeah, there it was probably more along the tail line because it certainly wasn't that way when I was growing up being a millennial.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, yeah, we got the gun shark here in the chat saying, I don't know if that's true. He says most millennials think that the boomers benefited from socialism when they had cheap college. See, that's funny to me because it's like, yeah, he's like, that's the meme, isn't it? And that's the thing is like, they think that everything is socialist. They think everything good is socialist and everything bad is capitalist. And it's super cringy. And I always make the argument, or when I do talk about it, we mostly focus on foreign policy on this channel, but when I talk about things like education, I always make the point that in my view, I don't think the government should be giving loans to anybody. I think that if you had to pay your entire way to college, prices would come down naturally on their own. Like just imagine right now in America, it's like 40,000 a year to go to school. Imagine if you couldn't just go to government and get a loan for that. Now all of a sudden you have to pay it out of pocket. What would happen? Only the rich would be able to afford it. So all the professors would be out of work. The schools would have to shut down, or they'd start lowering their prices. And eventually prices would come back down to a point like the 60s or 70s where it would actually be relatively affordable. And it would have a coupled bonus with that, because not only can you afford it now without going to debt, but you also don't have debt when you come out. Whereas now the problem is the professors can just raise the prices, make a ton of money, make their little racket, and then the government keeps pace with it and says, oh, it's okay, they raised the tuition this year, Johnny. We'll just give you a bigger student loan. And then you're like, oh, I guess I have to get out a bigger student loan because I can't be successful if I don't have a university degree. And then it's like, it's pretty soon, in 10 years, 20 years, if we just keep doing this, it'll be 100,000 a year to go to school. And then it's like, really? Like at some point, it's just, I mean, in my view, it's already stupid, but at some point it's going to get really stupid. And people are going to realize that student loans aren't the solution. Getting the government out of the university system is the solution. And we should have a free market in education so that, sure, you could say, well, nobody would be able to afford to go for the first couple of years. Sure, I get that. But the prices will have to come down to a point that people can start going again. And then they'll have degrees and they'll have no debt and they'll have nothing to do with the government. So
I think the other. Oh, sorry. Oh, you go.
So one of the issues with that is you would have to kind of compete on a global scale against South Korea, China, and some of the Japan, some of these other countries that do have a subsidized schooling system. And so if you had less people going into STEM or other majors, then you may be on a lower scale as far as the world and the education and the products you can provide as well. But there may be a solution where companies identify individuals in high school and then sponsor them through their college program would be a way to pay for it through private means. And so
I got a problem. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And one of the other things too with kind of education is there's a lot of majors out there that aren't worth anything. Like you go to school, you graduate, well, you're still a barista at Starbucks. Like versus like you could have communication, or I know that gets dragged upon, but you could have a communication major that actually makes people employable after college. And that's another one of the issues with the college is there are a bunch of majors where they're not in line with where the job market is. So there's people that are graduating that can't find work because the college major did not prepare them for the real world.
Right. I mean, the thing is, on the point about the corporate sponsorship thing, I'm hesitant to really kind of get behind that because I really don't want to become like the South Korean economic system where you go and work for Hyundai and they provide your food, your housing, they tell you who you can and can't marry. You have to ask your boss for permission to marry anybody. It's like the whole thing is kind of a huge tribal sort of system where it transcends the profit motive and basically goes into the paternal level where they control all aspects of your life. I don't like that. I would rather take a short run 5-10 year hit on education compared to other countries and just clean up the debt problem, get to a free market system, and then start winning big. Because I think the big problem, and I think one of the things that the pandemic is going to really kind of solidify in people's minds, is that we can't really operate the economy the same way that we've been doing it. We really have to treat this like, how the boomers and stuff and the silent generation treated the Great Depression, where they're like, yeah, we're gonna spend less than we make each month. Now we're gonna live as if there were an emergency tomorrow, that sort of thing. And I think that that's something where things are fundamentally going to change. I i see these Bernie bros and stuff, and the way that they think that, oh, well, if the government just gives a bigger loan, or if the government just, even just makes it universal, that everything will be fine. It's like, no, if the government makes it universal education, then the professors have even more incentive to charge even more tuition because the government will just give them the money. It's like, I think that professors are honestly one of the most overpaid groups in human history. In my view, if we got to a proper economy, a proper sort of like supply and demand equilibrium in a free market education system, professors would be making like $40,000, $50,000 a year, not like 150,000 like they are now. So that's my view.
I think the problem is when it comes to a lot of, I guess, higher education. One thing I notice is, at least from my view, because again, this isn't my field of study, but I think one thing when it came after college, which was just only a couple years ago, where it's like in my high school, they pushed on all the students to, make sure you go to higher education, and they don't really like to promote, community college or
Right.
trade or any other kind of like entrepreneurship. Like they really focus like solely on like, okay, can you get into a good state university? Can you get into this kind of university? Can you get into
Mhm.
this university out of state? Like that's a huge thing that's pushed on all the students throughout your 4 years of going to college. Because it's like I didn't even find out a lot about like the community college stuff until like, towards the end, when I was in my senior year. And it's like, I have gone to community college so far. I mean, starting up my program now at a state university. And the
Yeah.
thing is, like, you can save so much money by going to a community college. Like, I've saved thousands of dollars by going to community college, and it's like, it's so much better. You can, because you can get all your prerequisites out of the way and stuff like that, and you're not shelling out like 20,000 a year or some crap like that. It's like you're able to get all that stuff done. That way, at least when you're spending your money, it's focused solely on your degree. And I think that would probably bring down a lot of people's debt. If you just spend your first 2 years going to community college, and to me, to be totally honest, I think it's fine going to a community college. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Or if you go
Yeah.
to a trade school, if you want to be like a plumber, electrician, or someone who fixes different things, I don't see any problems with that. And a lot of people seem to like look down on that in
Yeah.
society. It's like I have a friend who's a plumber who makes like, I don't know, at least like I'll ballpark it around like maybe 60 grand a year. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard work. He does it, but it's like you can make a lot of money being a plumber, and he saves a lot of it. He has an older Mercedes, but he has nice stuff, and it's like you can totally do that. And I think a lot of people underestimate what you can do without having to go to college, and it just seems to be like the forefront of like every high school student's mind. And it's like
Yeah.
I think we should move away from that, like culturally.
No,
I just
I
find it kind of
agree.
dumb.
On the cultural thing, I think community college is probably a really good idea because one of the real sort of visceral, immediate criticisms that I kind of have of what Jaeger was talking about with, the idea of, well, because you were talking about in the chat, Jaeger, about how you talk about here, I'll just highlight the comment that you have a buddy working for Walmart as a pharmacist and they paid for his pharmacy school. He had a 5-year contract to fulfill, which he did, still works there. My problem with that is, like, I know for me personally, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was like 18, 19. And for the most part, I still don't. Like, I graduated university a year ago, but I've just basically taken time off working and just, whatever, because I wanted to focus on the channel. I haven't really applied around very, to any sort of places, because like I just trying to figure out what I actually want to do. I think that a place like a community college where it's less expensive, where you can kind of take a bunch of stuff, is good, because I don't think that we should just expect everybody to like know what they want to do as their career when they're like 18 and then go and sign up for these big sort of contracts and stuff. I mean, sure, you can say, well, there's a lot of money there, but I feel like on a social level that kind of locks people in, where it limits their freedoms and stuff. And I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like it's the sort of thing that, maybe we need to change the culture around when people go to university. Maybe it should be a normal thing that people start when they're 30 or something, So you get like 10 years and stuff to like, figure out what you want to do or whatever. I don't know. I mean, obviously, that's just an example, May 25. I just think, like, for me, as well as most people I know, nobody really knew what they wanted to do enough to sign that kind of commitment when you're like 18 or 19 years old. But that's just my view. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'll respond afterwards.
I just wanted to respond to Kevin real quick. When I first went off to college, I was actually supposed to go into genetics, and that's what I did for the first 2 semesters. And I got really bored of it though, because I didn't like it, and I really liked international relations. And I won't get into why, but like, because it's too long of a story. But it's like, people will switch their degrees a lot, because I think the average is at least 3 times for like the average, I think, for the student here, like in America. So it's like, you put all that money into going into this degree, and then you have to switch to another one. So a lot of people are already spending so much money, and then those classes don't transfer over. So then you have to spend even more money to take even more classes, and you're in school for much longer, buying different materials. And it's like, it's so much. And it's like, you're right. When you're 18 years old, you don't know what you want to do. It's going to take a couple of years, at least a good 5, to really get around to like what you want to do,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, for me, for example, I started off in engineering, then I transferred into economics, then I transferred into science, and then I transferred back into economics, and I wound up getting a degree in economics and political science. But it's like, I still don't really know what I want to do, except like I know that I want to do YouTube as like a full-time thing eventually, because I've realized like my experience going to university and whatnot really highlighted for me how there's just such a problem where the defaults, the assumptions that we have, the normative values that we have now all act against the interests of our civilization and the preservation of our civilization. And so I realized that right around when I was probably about 22, 23, I basically stopped caring about money. I was like, I need to figure out what I can do to like help safeguard the West. And of course, the military arises as one of the, the main areas that you can go in. But the problem is, it's like, even if you're the best person in the military, if the leaders and the political culture are crap, then you're not going to be effective. That's the problem. And so you could see that right now. I mean, you can look at how Trump's taken people out of Syria and everything, who, they were upset when they were told to go home, basically, right? So it's like, it's about changing the political culture. And so for me, it's like, I'm now trying to find something to do in the medium run. But for sure, in terms of the long run, if somebody offered me, say, I don't know, say like $100,000 to do something as a full-time job, but I could make 30,000 a year on YouTube, I'd take YouTube instead, because I can easily live on 30,000 a year. So, there's that sort of thing. I think that's another issue. Is like, some people care about money more than others. I care about money insofar as I'm able to survive and do my work. So, but some people really care about it. Like, they want to be like a millionaire as fast as possible, that sort of stuff. So,
Oh yeah. So just to kind of get back to kind of Anthony's point a little bit. So those first 2 years of college, in my opinion, are absolutely worthless. So after I got an associate's degree, it didn't make me any more employable in the job market. And I think those first 2 years could be eliminated. And then when you figure out what to do, it could just be specialized in that form of education rather than, well, I'm going to go take these roundabout classes just so these different institutions can get paid. Like, it should be more of kind of like a skills school where you go and you develop those skills moving forward. And now as far as the idea, I mentioned my buddy who's pharmacist. I originally was down that path as well for a little while. And they offered it. He was graduating, applying for different programs, and they offered it to him. And he said, "Well, I can either take out loans and do it myself, or I can go work for Walmart for 5 years." And he decided to go the route with Walmart, and decided he got in there and he liked it. So he's still there.
Yeah, see, I guess the problem for me is like I worked as a pharmacy assistant for about a year, and one of the things that I realized from working in terms of a commercial pharmacy was, I would never want to work as a commercial pharmacist. I saw like the amount of stress they were under, not being able to get like bathroom breaks, that sort of stuff, basically being, like basically treated almost like in a way that a McDonald's sort of line would treat their employees. And I looked at that and I was like, well, I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't like done some work in that sort of area first, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, I guess before you sign that up, you would have probably he would have had experience working in pharmacies in other contexts, but or at least done research on it. But I think it's a tough one though, because I think the only way that you can really kind of decide what you want to do is by trying out things that you don't want to do, because you'll figure out what it is that you want to do, because you don't know what you're going to like or not like. And so you talked about how you would do away with like the first 2 years, like the freshman and sophomore portions of it. But I guess the problem is, how would people kind of decide what they wanted to specialize in if they hadn't taken a bunch of random stuff to kind of figure out their area? That's kind of my question. I understand the cost. I understand that it basically does serve to make these institutions big cash, but
Well, the first 2 years are kind of a repeat of a lot of stuff you went over in high school. So you would kind of have a good idea as far as what you wanted to go into at the end of high school. But there's nothing that says you have to go into college right after high school. So, but those first 2 years, I mean, you're taking basic math, you're taking basic science, you're taking humanities, you're taking art, you're taking history. And I look at it from the perspective, like a lot of the things I like to do, I couldn't make a career in. I can't make a career of going out and just shooting guns because there's not that much money in it. But in order to have kind of the lifestyle I want, I need a career that's going to create some sort of financial backing in order to do the things I like to do. But also being somewhat interested in science, being interested in science growing up. So any scientific field that would be there would be kind of my direction. And if they had a council saying, well, these are the different types of jobs for what you want to do. If you want to go into science, these are the types of jobs. This is how much they pay. Which route would you want to take moving forward? It's part of the counseling aspect. But yeah, those first 2 years of college, like I didn't learn anything more than what I knew in high school.
Yeah. I mean that's a pretty fair point. I think one thing that kind of gets left out of these discussions, of course, is that when we look at the Zoomer generation specifically, especially when they're asked, well, what kind of work do you want to do? What do you see yourself doing? They all want to be like TikTok stars or YouTubers or this sort of stuff, basically, right? That's the sort of thing, right? Is that everybody kind of wants to be famous and stuff, but of course, not everybody can be. And it's the sort of thing that like takes a lot of work and stuff. But from the Zoomers and stuff that I've talked to, they all want to be, like the next Tfue or the next Ninja, that sort of stuff. And of course, university doesn't really go in that route. University is the sort of thing that's like, it's a big sort of amount of money to kind of figure out, what you want to do and everything. But when it does come to a lot of work, though, the thing that's interesting is like when it comes to a lot of the work that's out there, a lot of the jobs that do pay a lot of money don't even require like a university degree. Like, I mean, obviously Anthony was mentioning like tradespeople. You also work in terms of management, that kind of stuff that don't require university degrees either. I think part of the stigma for sure around community college is that a lot of it is like seen as like a status symbol. I know when I was younger and everything, it was like, well, college, because in Canada there's like colleges or universities. It's like people see colleges as less than universities, even though it's largely actually the same curriculum once you look into it. So it's the sort of thing that you know, if you did get rid of the first 2 years, it's it's tough because I feel like for a lot of people, I know for me, I did learn some stuff from doing stuff that I wouldn't have known that that wasn't really my area, because when I was in high school, I enjoyed physics. I enjoyed you know, that kind of stuff. I was pretty good at physics. So I figure, you know, maybe, you know, science would be interesting and whatnot. But of course, university science is pretty different. There's some overlap, but there's also other areas. And I eventually kind of like settled on economics. But economics is one that, at least for me, they never taught in university, or not university, in high school. Did you guys ever have economics classes offered in your high school?
Yeah, high school and college. I know for me, I think I can speak for my state. So in Michigan, you have the Michigan Transfer Agreement, in which you have to fulfill a certain amount of classes in college in order to, like, pursue different degrees, or to be able to transfer to a different, like, university if you started your first 2 years at a community college. And what it does is that it's like, you take an economics, history classes, you take science, you take at least a couple language classes, you take what is it, like, comprehensive writing classes, and then you take like a couple other types of classes. So it's more like embedded. So I think the big idea when it comes to that, and I know for other states it's gonna be differently. It's gonna be a lot different, and I know for Canada it's probably different. So, but I think the major idea when it comes to having some of these kind of classes, and I've learned a lot from them, is that they want to see where you can fall into, because it's like oftentimes a lot of students kind of like walk into college and they don't know what they want to do. So hence
Hmm.
why you have that first 2 years, so you can learn of like what you want to do, at least here in my state. Like, that's kind of the goal. That's like, okay, like, we're going to put you in this government class, we're going to put you in this economic class, we'll put you in this sociology class, we'll put you in history, and we'll put you in the baseline classes of all these different subjects, and then we'll see what you like. And I think that's like the idea of it, you know
Right.
and I know that, like, there's the argument of like, well, you don't technically need those classes, but at the same time, a lot of people enter college not knowing what they really want. And to make
Yeah.
sure that they know what they want, you want to make sure like they get at least like a general overview of what other subjects are like, so that way, just in case if they change their mind on something, like, hence, like, I had to take a sociology class, I had to take a psychology class, I've had to take a lot of different classes. And to an extent, I've almost wanted to switch my degree a couple of times. But the thing is, right, like, for those people, I think that's what it really does. And I can understand the whole, like, well, it's also to get the universities make money, but at the same time, it also helps students find the path of where they want to go down. So I think it's kind of
Yeah.
tricky to just get rid of it altogether.
See,
'Cause it's like,
that's
mhm.
yeah.
See, but you're
That's
kind
the
of you're
thing.
kind
Oh
of
yeah.
dumping in, $25 to $50,000 to decide what you want to do for your career. So maybe they should move some of those classes to high school, but I just don't see a point in, well, we got to pay $50,000 to decide what we're going to do for the rest of our lives, is kind of where the point I'm trying to make is, like,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
learn enough to point you in a career that's ever going to make back that money until you get further down the line and look at something.
See, I'm in between where both of you guys are. I'm in basically agreement with Anthony on, in terms of my personal experience and everything. I understand that argument that, people aren't going to know what they want to do, but on the same hand, what Jaeger, what you're saying makes all the sense in the world. It's like, yeah, but 50,000 or more is a huge upfront sum of capital, not to mention the opportunity cost of what you could have done with that in other areas. It's a big deal. And so that's for me why I see now, like when I was younger, I used to call myself a democratic socialist when I was in high school and stuff,
But
and now I'm like a neocon and everything. I think that I want to get rid of the government loan process and just have it all be private expense, because then those
well, there
first
would
two
still be
years
required classes. There would still be
so
required classes for
yeah, but those
universities.
first
Like,
2 years now won't be 50,000 anymore. They might be like
mhm.
8,000, because nobody's going to be able to afford to pay 50,000. So the schools will have to
Well,
lower
I didn't.
prices, lower professor salaries, that sort of stuff.
I mean, for a university level, sure, you could be paying 20 to 50,000 or something like that. But like for me, when I when I was in community college, I didn't spend anywhere near that. I mean, I'm in university now, but like I didn't spend anywhere near that. Like you take your first 2 years of community college and you spend a couple $1,000s
Oh,
on
really?
like two. Yeah, community college classes aren't like a lot of money. Like community college classes, well, at least here in Michigan, that like you'll pay maybe 500 to 600 at most for like a class. I know for some of the science classes they're closer to that though, but you can spend as little as like $400 per class. So I don't know,
Oh,
like
okay.
so like community, I mean, and there might be like subsidies or something like that for community colleges here in my state. So I'm not sure like why it's like that low, but I know for at least community colleges here in Michigan, and like they're relatively pretty cheap. Like I've never seen one that's costed more than like anywhere near than like $1,000, nowhere near that. So I mean, maybe there's some place in the U.S. or Canada where people are spending that much money. I haven't seen that though. So it's like, I mean, you'll probably drop maybe a couple grand doing 2 years. I did community college though, but you'll nowhere. I can guarantee you'll never spend 20 grand, like that much
Huh.
money. Like that's pretty ridiculous amount of money. I mean, for a university level, well, if you have room and board and and you're taking like a full set of classes, I can see how you can pay like 20,000 for like 2 years at like a university. I can give to that though. Like if you go to like I don't know like Washington State or like I don't know Connecticut State University or it's like some big university you have to live at, I can understand because the room and board is a lot of money. It's a lot of money
Right.
to live at the
Well,
school.
yeah,
So
and
are you only counting
Americans.
classes? Because like
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like those figures change depending on what you're doing in college. Are you looking at
Right,
a
and a
department?
lot of people go outside of state. I know if you go to a school outside of your state, it's like 3 times the tuition or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to cost more, and then also book fees, and yeah, there's more of cost at college than just what the tuition is. Books are absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh
you're
yeah,
No,
yeah,
I
looking
no, for
know
about
it's
sure.
$600-700 a semester for books, and you sell them back for $50.
Yeah, see, I actually stopped doing that. For me, I would spend about $500 to $600 a semester on books. I usually do 5 or 6 classes a semester. I got tired of selling them for pennies on the dollar. So since about year two, I just kept all mine because I'm like, that I'd rather have this material to read later than sell it for pennies on the dollar. But I understand why people sell them back because most people are kind of just there to get through the degree so that they can get like the certificate that allow them to work or whatever. So, whereas
But
for
I
me,
but
like I'm genuinely like interested in a lot of stuff. Um, it's the sort of thing though that uh a lot of what I found though is that a lot of the books, of course, are either going to be biased or in some cases even written by the professor who's teaching the course. So, that's a thing too. So,
well, I think the other thing is when it comes to degrees, like okay, like if if you're going for like let's say like urology, like for example, like let's say you want to get like an MD in urology, yeah, you'll 100% spend like like tens and thousands of dollars going through like what like 8 years of schooling or 10 years or something like that. Like I don't know how many years though, but you get the point.
yeah, I think the
You
average
spend
is about 400,000, I think, for to
oh
become
okay okay so yeah so like depending on your degree like it depends how much money like you're gonna spend. Like if you just get like a general like liberal arts degree, like okay like maybe you spend what like 40 50,000 if you're going for 4 years at like a university and you stay there and you live there, like yeah I can see how you can spend that much money. But it also depends like what you do, if you live on and off campus, what you choose, if you got scholarships to go there, if you were able to find ways to get like reduced costs of books and stuff like that. Because what I do is that like I buy like I'll buy like books that are already used from other students sometimes, and I'll do that to get things at a cheaper price. If you look across the board, if you get it like a degree in like sociology or I don't know, like in philosophy or in history, stuff like that, like you're not going to be spending nearly as much as money as like you would if you're going for the STEM fields, because the STEM fields are the ones that are really, really expensive. And I think when it comes to the other types of degrees, like the liberal arts ones, those are a lot cheaper. So I think like depending how you look at like the different data that's like put out there for like cost of school, like that's the other thing you have to like look at. You have to look at the breakdown of degrees and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's the cost is gonna be different for everyone because that's why you see like some people have like $200,000 in debt, some people have like $40,000 in debt. Like there's a huge range, or 400,000, like you said. So it
Yeah.
really just depends on your choices and decisions and what opportunities you had in
Well,
college.
Well, I guess my point just in general is like I think that they're just overpriced in general, and that if you got rid of the student loan system and everybody had to pay out of pocket, I believe that the tuition prices would come down over time substantially. That's my view. Would you guys agree with that or disagree with that?
I'm not very well versed on the situation, so I can't comment either way.
Okay.
So I do think the prices would go down, but I would also worry about kind of the world scale of kind of falling behind in education as well. So like it would work for the United States, but then you look
Mhm.
at countries like Japan, South Korea, are very highly educated, and we'd fall behind them on the big competitive curve as far as education.
Do you think though that getting ahead on the debt crisis though compared to them would be the right trade-off? Because I know in America right now, America is coming up on about $2 trillion of student debt. To me, I look at that and I just see that as completely an untenable situation for a country to bear. When 10% of your GDP is in student debt, that's like somehow that has to be cleaned up. Because otherwise it's going to get worse and worse over time if we just allow the prices to kind of keep going up. I mean, I understand what you're saying that on a strategic level, on a national level, it makes sense to be competitive here and there. But I really think that, especially in America, it's been going and in Canada too, we've been going in the wrong direction about this, where we've had just way too much of an assumption that, well, we'll just or we'll give loans to whatever the prices for tuition are, and that's allowed schools to charge whatever the hell they want, and it's just gone up and up and up. I feel like at some point we need to take a short-term hit on the education in order to clean up our debt problem. That's kind of my view. But
Well, I don't know if the government. I think the government actually makes money on student loans via the interest, as long as mass amounts of people don't default on them. Because some of the interest rates, I want to say, are between 5 and 12%.
yeah, no,
So
you're
that,
right. No,
so I
no, no.
think,
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's just a lot of people are economically stifled as a result of it. Like they can't go into areas that they'd want to. They can't go say into trades or something because they got all this debt. So they have to continue at whatever job they have because they're up to their neck in payments and stuff. And that's kind of my view on it, is that if you were to clear the country of debt, that people would be more free to do what they really want, and that the economy as a whole would be a lot sort of stronger at the end of the day than having everybody kind of stuck in areas because they got to pay bills. But
yeah, I agree with that. And just one other comment on that. If you're looking for a trade to go into, underwater welding pays $100 to $150 an hour.
yeah.
Like welding on the bottom of ships and stuff like that, that pays more than anything I've ever seen.
Well, it's probably because most people don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's supply and demand, right? Low supply, high demand. So
That's the thing.
They're
Like,
afraid of Jaws.
The thing is, right? Like, I think the reason why some of these types of jobs are worth so much money, that's like, like let's say like you're an electrician that like fix transformers or like power lines or whatever, and you have to, and your shifts are like at like 10 p.m. to like 4 in the morning. It's like no one wants to do that. It's one of those things you have to weigh in. It's like, you get more money, but there's a reason why most people don't want that job. There's a reason why the I guess the barrier to entry, is kind of high there, and there is a reason why there's so many benefits to it, because again, the pool of labor is very small, and it's in the supply, is obviously super small. So again, the demand is going to be really high. Hence why there's a high amount of benefits to it, such as getting paid 150 an hour or something like that.
yeah. Well, it's a danger pay too. I mean, it's the sort of thing that, if you were if you were smart about it and you saved up a lot of money, you could do it for like 5 or 6 years or whatever, and then essentially live on the investment for the rest of your life if you were able to save up like 800,000 or whatever. Because 150 an hour, if you did that as a full-time thing, I mean, let's keep it real, that's 300,000 a year. Say you live on 30,000 a year, invest 270, put that into well, you'd have taxes, but say you put 200,000 into ETFs, grow out 13%, you do that for 4 years, you got $800,000. If you had $800,000, you could pay yourself a salary of $35,000 for the rest of your life, assuming 4% of the investment, and you never run out of money. So you could say, well, it's like 35,000 or whatever, but it's like, yeah, but then you'd be financially independent for the rest of your life. So I know some people like work though, and they don't want to be financially independent, or even if they are, they still work for other people because it's like that's just what they like doing. But for me, most people I know don't enjoy work at all. Everybody's trying to figure out how to get rich, basically, so they don't have to work. So that's an interesting strategy, though. Do something like that for a few years and then retire, right? So we've
Well, you
got
can do that. You can do that system too, and pay for college if you wanted to. Like I had a buddy who was an electrician, a lineman, and he did that for
Mhm.
5 years, saved up, went to school, and became an electrical engineer because of
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Because not only did he have that experience as far as doing that, but then he had the degree. So he got paid a lot more coming out of school because he had that experience graduated debt free, and then now he's an engineer and he has experience. So the workers can't say you've never done this before because he had.
Right. Yeah. No, that's an interesting route too. And then there's also like a lot of entrepreneurial people who just start their own business and everything too. And some people are really successful that way. We have the gun shark in the chat saying that the default rate is through the roof on the federal loans and everything. The thing that, to my knowledge, is that in both the United States and Canada, you can't declare bankruptcy on student loans. So it's not exactly a default. It's just that people can't make the payments, but they can't clear that debt. That debt's with them until they die is the thing. So, like, I know I watch Dave Ramsey almost every day, and Dave Ramsey will often get calls. I mean, he's my favorite financial advisor, financial guru, all that sort of stuff. I really got pilled on him in the last year of my economics program.
I think
Um,
his I've watched Dave Ramsey. I used to watch him a couple years ago. I think he's way too radically against credit cards. Like you need a credit card to be able to operate in American society. Like I think what I think like he's a bit way too anti that, and it's like you need to have one. Like
well,
like for real. Like
his point though would be, I understand what you're saying in terms of like as an emergency sort of thing. Like if you don't have cash on hand, it gives you a venue to go to. His point would be, and he's right about this, and they have done behavioral economic studies on this. I remember reading about this when I was in school, for example, that you go into, say, a restaurant or something, and if you pay cash, or if you know you're going to pay cash, you spend less than if you pay with a card, even if you have the money. Like, let's just say you're a millionaire or something, and that the money itself isn't the issue. It's not like you have to go into debt or whatever. Just paying with a card, even with a debit card, in fact, you'll spend more than if you pay with cash, because cash itself, like, bills, coins, that kind of stuff, when you take it out of your wallet and you give it to the cashier or you give it to the waiter or whatever, it activates pain receptors in your neural system, whereas using a card doesn't register any pain receptors. And so even if the money's left you virtually, you don't have this feeling of loss. And so that's why he recommends paying with cash for everything, basically, is so that you'll limit your expenditure even if you have the money. That's part of his
but
reason, right?
I would say to counterpoint that, like I use a credit card for everything, and I have a really high credit card score. And the reason for that is because I always pay off on time, and I get money back. I get money back from my bank. So I'm really kind of winning both ways. So I think on that end, as far as the credit card spending goes, I think the way we treat credit cards is bad, but I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that like I don't have like a fundamental like thing against credit cards. I think it just has to be used responsibly. And I think the problem is like when we've talked about this before, as far as like education for fiscal stuff goes. I think a lot of people are like uneducated with it though. But I mean, I use a credit card just fine. And I have, I know how much I have and I know my spending limits. But, you're right. I mean, when you use cash, I think the other problem with cash too is it's like a lot of places don't really take cash as much though. Like I know if I go downtown, there's going to be certain small, like, new and hip kind of restaurants that don't take cash anymore. And you have to use cards. Like I know when I was in Silicon Valley, they didn't allow cash. I even went into the Google I went to the YouTube headquarters, and I actually wanted to buy a shirt or a hat, and I went up to the counter and I gave them a $20, and they said like we don't take that.
Yeah.
So and there's also like bagel restaurants and stuff like that, like these bagel places that they have now. I mean like the really new kind of chains. I forgot what the chain's
Right.
called, but like
Well,
they don't take cash anymore. You have to use a card. And
yeah,
I
or a debit card. But
I
that's the
just find
thing.
cash obsolete. Like that's my view on it. Unless people are using cash for things.
I'm pretty conservative when it comes to this kind of stuff now. I think that at the end of the day, we're probably, especially with the virus and everything else, we're going to have to go back to a 1950s understanding of using money. That we have to get off, this system of just this perpetual debt economy where it's made us all vulnerable, and it's unfortunate. And what Ramsey would say, of course, is that, to your argument there about how you'll get credits back. I mean, yeah, that's the thing with credit cards, is that you usually get like 1 to 3% of the money that you spend back. The problem is they are the most wealthy companies in the world. They've done billions of dollars of research. They know, like, the house always wins. They know that for every person there is like you that might net out positive from that. They know that there are a lot of people that will get suckered into it and then go into big debt, and then they'll make more money off of the interest than they would getting bonus dollars and stuff back. And so it's a net win for the companies
They
themselves.
call me there's actually a nickname for that. It's called dead weights, I believe. I think it's
Yeah.
called, or dead beats or something like that.
Yeah, you're a deadbeat
I
if you don't use your credit card big time, like over
I'm
30%
very
utilization.
conservative with my credit card, and I always get money back. Actually, I think I get almost up to 3% now, and I've only gotten more benefits ever since I've
Right.
been using my credit card for the past 5 years. And I've
Yeah.
always built a good credit line. I can get stuff. I can take out really good loans with a very small interest rate
But see,
for
that's the
me.
thing. That's the thing that Ramsey would say, though, is that to what end is this thing around? Because you can say, well, there's a real material benefit from the bonus dollars and stuff, 3% back. That's not nothing over time. That makes sense. But he would say, but then the whole thing is just so that you can get a bigger credit score so that you can borrow even more money. And his point is, we need to get to a society in which everybody pays cash for everything. And so, we have a culture now where people say, well, oh, I can qualify for a $500,000 house, I'll get a $500,000 mortgage, instead of, oh, I could pay $70,000 for a house and pay it in cash and just save that up over 10 years or whatever. People don't want to do that. That's the problem. And so it's made us a lot more vulnerable as an economy. It's locked people into jobs that they don't want to do because they're unhappy, but they have bills to pay and everything. And I think Ramsey's a real pill, and a lot of people are going to disagree with that. I'm definitely on the minority on that one, but I think that on that area, that's definitely something that we could learn from, like, the Islamic banking system, of just avoiding interest, avoiding the debt system, and trying to create a real wealth economy in the long run. That's my view, because I think that these sorts of systems are bound to collapse if they go on at this level that we're operating on. You're perpetually going to be locked into this cycle of crashes and insolvencies, and we can see it right now post 2008. I mean, we will wrap up the stream pretty soon, but I'll say, post 2008, the big banks were regulated so that they weren't able to give out mortgages willy-nilly like they did prior in the run up to the 2006 crisis in terms of the housing market, where they would just give anybody a mortgage for anything without having to prove income. The problem is since that happened, now more than half of the mortgages in America aren't through big banks that are regulated. Now they're through like fly-by-night operations, and some of them have a default rate that's over 15%. And so we're going to have an even bigger subprime housing crisis in the 2020s. So
well, here's the thing. I think when it comes to the whole like debt economy, I can understand it to a degree from the macroeconomic classes I've taken. I've only taken a couple in college so far, but for what I understand, it kind of makes sense in a way, because like, okay, like let's say I have to buy a car, and it's like, let's say it's $20,000, and just any car, right? And I make like such and such every day, right? And like let's say I have like two children I have to pay for, and I have other living expenses. I don't have enough money to put down 20 grand, but I need the car right away. So you put down a down payment of, I don't know, like 10 or 15 or 20%, or how much you can pay for, and then you get to use the car, and then you eventually pay it off, and then you're fine. Because realistically speaking, most Americans don't have enough money to put down, or especially like when you talk about houses, you don't have enough money to put down 200 grand.
right.
That's
But
just not how things work.
Ramsey would say buy a $5,000 car. That's what he would say. Like,
well, no. I'm just saying, like just for example, or like even if you bought like a really small home, that's 120 grand. Nobody has that much money laying around.
see, he would say that that's the problem. He would say that everybody's just rolling on leverage and debt and everything, and that it's a system that's unsustainable in the long run. That's the problem, because say you do that and you go with a mortgage or whatever, but let's say you lose your job after 7 years through a 25-year amortization. Now the bank's got your house, so it's like, okay, now you spend all that time, and now you don't have anything to show for it. Now you're bankrupt. It's like it's a really unfortunate situation. So
with a home, though, a home's different than a car, because a lot of times homes will gain value. So real estate's a little bit better of investment than a car is, because you can flip your house. Like if you get laid off unemployed and decide to move out, you after paying payments for 7 years, you could probably, unless there's a tank in the market, get what you paid for your house, in some cases more.
That's right, true, but I'm just saying that you don't know what the economy is going to be like down the road, and that obviously a lot of people got foreclosed upon in 2006 to 2008, and a lot of people did wind up literally being evicted from their homes because they couldn't pay their mortgages. So it can happen on a large scale, right? Because people were insolvent, whereas if they had paid cash for it and just rented for 15 years instead, they would have owned their property and been invulnerable.
But no one has liquid cash, though.
But see, his point is that people would, if everybody moved to that model, like that would just be the new norm. You rent until you.
I think we would have to put on. I think it's called like the multiplier effect or something like that. Like for every dollar you put in, like the bank uses like 50 or like over 50% of that. So like you would have to have a lot of new banking policies and federal policies like on economics and whatnot to be passed. Like this, you would have to do like major legislation. And as of now, it's more realistic to be responsible, take out the loan if you have to for stuff like a house or whatnot, for your living quarters, and pay it off over time. Make sure you get the best deal as possible. And I think that's the route you should go right now, because I don't see like any like crazy legislation to get out of this debt economy like what Dave Ramsey wants.
Yeah, I would oppose legislation, honestly. Like, I am a capitalist at the end of the day. I don't want the government telling people what to do. For me, I would change the high school curriculum to where instead of having to take all these English courses and everything else, maybe you have like 1 or 2 English courses, but you have like 5 or 6 required personal finance courses, that sort of thing, where it's like you literally cannot graduate high school unless you've proven that you basically know what you're doing with money, right? So, because then nobody's going to be like, because here's the thing about the mortgage that gets often left out. If you actually study amortization curves and all that sort of stuff, on a typical 25 or a 30-year amortization on a 3% interest rate on a mortgage, say you get a house for $500,000. you are going to pay, and say you don't make anything more than the minimum, you just make the minimum, but you make the minimum every month, and then after 25 years you own the house. You spent 500,000 or whatever buying the house. Here's the thing, you know how much you would have spent on interest to the bank just to have the loan? You would have spent about $500,000. So why would you pay double for something? That's a huge opportunity cost that's lost, and people do it because it's the norm. It's like I can see it in a car. I can see it in an emergency situation, right? Why you would have to go into debt. That makes sense, right? But on a big long-term scale, doing that with property is pretty dangerous and risky. But even if there's no risk involved, you're still giving the bank whatever your house is worth just in interest over that time. So,
well, I think for most people, when you get out of college, you're going to have to take out some kind of loan, at least to get like an apartment or something like that, because it's not like when you get out of college, like you have to have somewhere to live. Like you can't just live on the streets for like 10 years and save up like 200 grand to get the house. Like you're like no one does that. So what
no,
you
I
just
know.
do,
I'm just saying about renting. I'm just saying about like you would rent then, I think one of the other things that would change if people kind of went with Ramsey's model is that people would get off the coast. Like I'm saving up money right now to leave the coast. I don't want to live on the coast anymore. It's way too expensive. You're basically a rent slave to the elites out on the coast. Whereas there are provinces and states in the interior or even in Atlantic Canada, for example, that there are rents like under $500 a month versus if you're on the coast, like well over $1,000 a month. It's like you're basically a rent slave at that point, and it makes it very difficult. And Henry's talked about this before, how people are moving out to Texas right now from California and stuff. Those people are going to become homeowners and wealthy and independently millionaires, whereas if they stayed in California, they would forever be rent slaves to the elites out there. So
Well,
I think
I was gonna
there
say
you
the
go.
same thing. Same thing's happening in Colorado. Denver's growing. Boise, Idaho. Salt Lake City, Utah.
yeah,
Even Phoenix, Tucson, Arizona. So they're kind of branching out from California and moving to all these different places.
true.
Well,
True.
I think the biggest thing is that it's like, I think it wouldn't be exacerbated so bad if most Americans lived within their means and still took out debt. I think that would probably curb a lot of the issues, because it's like let's say you make like, I don't know, like 50, 60 grand a year, and you go for a house that's like 150,000 or 120,000, something like that. Like you don't go for like the $500,000 home.
Right.
So like if you live within the means, like yes, you're still taking out loans, but you're going to really, I think you can curb a lot of the problems if you just put the education, and then when you take out your loan to
Yeah.
pay off, it's not like as bad. It's like you said, like you're not paying double for the house. You'll pay more for the house, of course, because the bank wants to make money,
Right.
but the problem will mostly be, I think the problems will be alleviated. Like I can see why we have a debt economy though. Like I can see the realism to that though, because I know when I get out of college, I'm not going to have 100 grand, and I save up money all the time. I save up
Yeah.
to 25% of my check, and I still won't have 100 grand.
Oh,
So it's like
no,
you have to take.
for most people it take about 15 to 20 years to save up the money to get a house. It's just instead of being in a mortgage for 25 years, you just own the house when you pay it off, like when you buy it. That's the difference, I guess, is that you just rent for 20 years instead of paying a mortgage for 20 years, that sort of thing. But you're not paying the money to the bank in interest. Because with rent, like rent still covers maintenance, all that kind of stuff. And so the other thing with this though is that you're lucky, of course, to live in a state where you can get a house for like $150,000. Where I live in British Columbia, like southern British Columbia, the cheapest freehold house in the city I live in is about $700,000. But the average
Well, well,
income here is thirty
well, well,
thousand a year. So
well, keep in mind here in Michigan, there's a huge range. Like I know, like south of me in Detroit, in downtown Detroit, the houses have exploded because Detroit's coming back. But if you go to like the suburbs of Detroit, like if you go to the outskirts of Detroit, like the more dangerous parts, like you can find a very cheap house, very very cheap house. Especially if you go to places like in other parts of the state. Like there is cheap housing,
yeah,
and there's also very expensive housing. I mean, Michigan's a
yeah,
huge range. I mean, you can go for 100 grand, you can go for over 2 million. I mean,
Yeah.
it really goes from anywhere. And I think when it comes to different regions, well, you also live on the coast as well. So
Yeah.
naturally speaking, it's going to be more expensive. Whereas I live inland, like I live in the Midwest. I mean, Michigan's the more wealthier state, but even then, though, like a lot of the houses still don't compare to the coasts. You know, it's
Man.
like in New. Mhm.
Well, no, I just want to say on that though. Obviously, we have a range here. Like there are houses around where I live that'll go for like 15-20 million dollars. It's just the thing is, the ghetto so-called part of the town that I live in, the houses start right around $700,000, and you're like, how can the place where there's like stabbings and all this stuff and everything be a place that costs 20 times the national or the regional income
There might
to
be
live in?
gentrification though. There might be
There
like
is
a
some gentrification for sure. I'm just saying, like, even if you buy a very crappy place that's falling apart, just the land alone is worth over $600,000 for a tiny little house. And you're like, but then of course it goes up from there. Like if you go and live in like, the eastern side of the city that's like more well-to-do or whatever, you're looking at houses that are going to start around the $2 to $3 million mark
Mhm.
each. And you're like, there's still a range. It's just the problem where I live is that the bottom of that range is 20 times an average person's income, whereas where you're talking about the average starting points is probably like 3 or 4 times an average income, right, to get into those
well,
cheap places.
I think especially since housing's gone up though. I mean, I think it's more closer to 150 grand to 200 grand. So it's
Okay.
not like at 100 grand. Well, at the '08 crisis, my parents, their house was only worth 150,000 at one point. So I mean, so since the crash, I mean, houses have gone up. So it's probably closer to like 150 to 200 grand for cheap houses, but
Yeah.
houses are still a lot cheaper. I mean,
That's
here.
insane though. Like because to me it's like imagine if you could get a house here, like you're basically $500,000 cheaper to get into the crappiest house in the entire city I live in. That's of course we deal in Canadian dollars here too. So it's like you guys have higher purchasing power as it is. It's about 1.4 times what a Canadian dollar is, which by the way, if you want to support this channel, go to patreon.com/superpower broadcasting because it's in US dollars. And so the Canadian conversion helps me out even more in that sense. But the thing is, it's like, it's just, it's kind of amazing how much of a premium there is on the coast. And yet, I've said this before, the coasts are beautiful. Like it's a very beautiful place to live in. But honestly, even without the massive economic penalty of living here, the political culture out here is so cringy, man. It's like Green Party or like socialist and all this sort of stuff. It's like, I mean, I know Michigan is like a swing state and whatnot, but it's like not only do you have cheaper housing, way cheaper housing, but you probably don't have to deal with the same level of just, coastal cringe that I
We
have.
have we have big lakes. We have big lakes here in Michigan. So some of the housing on those some of those coastlines that touch like like Lake Erie, like we have lakes that share with Canada, and I know you know that. And so some
Yeah.
of those houses are going to be more expensive, of course. But like generally speaking, like around here, if you just go on I mean, like if you just looked up on the internet, like well, not specifically in my area though, but if you look in like certain other counties, you can that are not even too far from me. You can easily find a house that's like 120 grand, 150 grand. That's like relatively nice. I mean, okay, is it not in the best area? Maybe not, but you get like a small
Yeah.
lawn. You maybe get like a little bit of a basement for storage. You'll get like a small one, like a one sized house for two people or whatever, like a two bedroom. It's but like obviously again when it comes to the coasts, things are gonna be worth a lot more,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the thing because that demand's so high, right? Because it's like if you want to live, I don't know, like let's say you want to live in Flint, Michigan, right? Well, some of the housing there sure is a little bit more expensive, but you also have to deal with the fact that like a lot of people don't want to live there.
Yeah.
People want to live in British Columbia, like that. Like that's cool to people. That's
No,
cool,
I know
right?
it's cool. I know it's cool. I'm telling you right now, if you're watching this program out there, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. If you're going to live out here, you're going to have a lot of people who they got their history lessons growing up from literally, I'm not even making this up, Michael Moore. And I know that that's a thing in America too, obviously. But I mean, if you thought that the Democrats were bad, wait until you see what like the NDP's like, the Green Party's like. It's a really kind of it's a cringy political culture, but at the same time, you know, it costs millions of dollars to live out here, you know, and it's just
See,
it's ironic to me, you know. So
the funny
uh,
thing that like when it comes to Democrats here in Michigan, the funny thing that's like in some districts they're really moderate, and then you also have like Talib, you know, from
yes,
MS-13. So the thing is, right, like the thing is when it comes to Michigan is that there's a huge range of Democrats. Like you have the Clintons to the Hassan Pikers. Like the range is so crazy, and that's the same thing with the Republicans. The Republicans can go from a John McCain all the way to like I don't know, like a Ron Paul, or
yeah.
like or like a tanky like person. So the thing is, becomes like Michigan has such a huge blend of different political ideologies, like that. Like that's what makes it so interesting. You can have far right and far left, and everything in between.
Oh man, I do want to go to the progressive apostates comment here on YouTube. He says, "Why buy a house when you could donate to 6% Jank instead?" And that's a good point. That's a good point. Jank Uger, of course, raised over $1 million to get 6% of the vote, running against Christy Smith over in California, and he lost. He lost bigly, as Trump would say, and. And but hey, he wants money. I mean, yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. He has a 5-year plan. Progressive apostate says that was his 5-year plan. I'm talking about. Oh yeah, so yeah, no, Jank's the kind of guy. By the way, Jank's a millionaire. That's what's funny about a lot of this stuff. Like Jank has a net worth over $3 million, but he's desperate for money, man. So like you could give him and Hassan the money instead. Like you could just say, yo, who needs a house? I'm going to give Jank and Hassan all my money. Some people will
So,
do
so the 5-year plan. So the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. Number 1, TYT. Number 2, our revolution. Number 3, Justice Democrats. Number 4, Jank Pack. Number 5, Wolf Pack.
that. Jank Pack. Dude, Jank Pack. That's such a meme. I mean, he's always talking crap about Citizens United and everything. Yeah, and somebody pointed out here, they're like, he puts his name on everything. Like he's got, yeah, Trump envy. He says, yeah, like, oh yeah, that was you, Jaeger. You said, yeah, Jank Pack, lol. He wants his name on everything like Trump. It's Trump envy. I honestly, with TYT, they are like Orange Man bad. Like they're obsessed with Trump. Like we talk about Trump on the show and stuff, but we don't talk about Trump all the time. And sometimes when we do, like with Iran, we actually give Trump credit. For TYT, it's just Orange Man bad, nonstop.
And give us money. We need money. We need
Yeah,
money
we
to fight
need
the
money.
the Democrat establishment.
They've had over $20 million. It's closer to $26 million infused into them through corporate donors and stuff over the last few years. But they're desperate for money, man. Like every video, Jank's always like, we need your support. We need your money. It's like, yeah, but you guys got a $20 million donation recently. Like, I mean, and then they fire all their staff. They got rid of What the Flick. I mean, when they got rid of What the Flick, I basically stopped watching that network for any serious reason, and it was just all watching them ironically at that point, because I thought that Ben Mankiewicz and Alfonso and those guys on there, I liked that show. I genuinely liked What the Flick, but now it's all just communist crap. That's all. Like it's all the political stuff. It's all Orange Man Pad. It's all Bernie this, Elizabeth Warren's actually evil, Tulsi's a neocon, Bernie.
We're going to war.
World War III. Like they're a joke, man. And I mean, the good thing is that the internet basically recognizes that. I mean, I was talking about earlier in the chat how like I was watching old Devin Tracy videos from the last few months, and he goes after TYT. That's a big focus of what he does at Atheism is Unstoppable. He goes after TYT, but it's like, I mean, he really did kind of create a lot of the big memes that got out there, like the brown buffalo, all this sort of stuff with Shank. I think a lot of the internet, even like a lot of the left wing internet now recognizes that Young Turks is trash, but they're still out there thinking that they're like the biggest. Well, they say they're the biggest online network, and I guess the biggest online news network. I guess that might be technically true, but they have a really poor views per subscriber ratio. Like
I
I was going
I
to say the Daily Wire is probably bigger than what they are. They're the largest downloaded podcast.
Yeah, well,
think
Daily
the other
Wire only
thing-
has like 1/5 or something the subscribers that they do, but Daily Wire gets the views on every video, whereas
Did you guys see the announcement from Chank? They're gonna do TYT on Twitch. Did you guys see that? From a couple
what?
days ago. I
They're
sent that link
moving
to you
to
guys.
Twitch.
Okay. Well, I'll send you guys the video again, but
Jake. No, dude,
yeah, well,
dude,
Shank wants to be on Twitch.
no,
He's gonna be
dude.
on the same
I like
platform as
this
you.
comment. I like this comment from Mike, and because this is what I was thinking. Like, Jank Pack is the cringiest shit I've heard in my life. Because imagine we've all spent years, we've seen the memes, we've seen the videos of Jank calling out PACs, calling out Christy Smith, calling out Hillary Clinton, calling out Joe Biden, calling out basically everybody who's not AOC and Bernie for taking corporate PAC money. And now he's gonna have his own PAC. How cringe is that? I mean, what a full circle of cringe, man. I'll be back in a minute. But I mean, Jank, he's a living, breathing meme at this point. He got 6%. He spent $1 million. He spent over $1 million. The guy who came right after him in the results spent about $500 and got almost as much. He spent 2,000 times as much as the next runner up, and they both didn't become congressmen. That's so sad, man. It's so sad. He's 6% Jank. I'll be back.
So
yeah,
just,
I mean,
I was going to say, go ahead.
Oh no, actually no, you go. I've been talking a lot.
Oh, I was going to say, just going through the most recent videos of the Young Turks. So they have 4.7 million subscribers. The ones that did tonight, 25K, 11K, 24K, 28K, 33K, 15K. And their last popular video was Twitter punishes Candace Owens. And that was 166K. But everything else is in the low market. So they're struggling.
Wait, you said 27K views on one of their videos? 27K?
Jake says he's winning. Jake said on his Twitch video that
I would say winning. I would say that 27K is probably about his average.
Whoa. So that's a 0.57% view per subscriber ratio. For reference, this channel averages about 170 views per subscriber or per video rather, and we have about just over 300 subscribers. So say about 50%, roughly 55%. This channel has about 110 times as many views per subscriber as they do. Now you could say, well, that's skewed because it's a very small channel. But like, okay, Devin Tracy, Atheism is Unstoppable. He gets about 25 to 50K views per video. He has about 100,000 subscribers. So he gets about what they do. He has 2% of the subscribers they do. That's pathetic on their end.
Yeah, so their most popular videos is where they bring up somebody in Trump or the Trump administration, and then they'll get up into the 100,000s. But anything they do on the left, it's going to be in the lower, probably 50,000, 25 to 50,000. So, yeah, they want to be anti-Trump because that's where their views are coming from.
That's where their views. That's like 4.5 million of their subscribers never watch the channel anymore. Like because those are numbers that you would expect from a channel with like 200,000 subscribers, right? Like that's amazing, man. Like I mean, at some point YouTube is going to do like another refresh to delete, old inactive accounts. They're going to go down to like 500,000 subscribers probably. You know, this channel would go down too, but we'd probably be at like 270 instead of like 306. They're going to go from like 4.7 mil to like half a mil. I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing because you can almost guarantee that each of those views, it's the same people watching each time. It's not like a new set of people. It's they probably only have like 100,000 people. They probably only have like 2% of their subscribers that ever watch any of their videos.
Well, Jake should at least get 6%. At least.
At least.
Yeah.
No, that's why he started Jank Pack so that he can get it up to 6%. No, Jank Pack. Oh man, imagine writing a donation check to Jank Pack. Jank Pack. Jank Pack.
Donate money to Jank so he can fight 6% of the time to get money out of politics.
Give money to my political action committee to fight political action committees. Like what? Like,
Well,
I like
there was that thing with the Justice Democrats too. There was an article that they're forming a super PAC now, and that was one of their leading things that they said that when they started that. So,
man.
See, I really feel like the Justice Dems are trying to split off from the Democratic Party. I feel like they're gonna be like this. I feel like they're trying to split away from it though. Like that's how I see this super PAC. That's just my view of it.
Oh, for sure. I find this funny here about how with Jank, Mike's saying, you know, he wrote a book too. I didn't hear about him writing a book either. That's an interesting update. I guess it's going to be a lot of stuff like, you know, I'm a fighter, I'm loud, I'm tough. Bernie 2024. Young Turks, man. Young Turks. I mean, they're basically just a meme at this point. Everybody knows what they're gonna say. They're, you know, if it's anything that's not to do with Trump, as Jaeger, what you were saying, it's not gonna get any views. And if it's to do with Trump, it's gonna be Trump bad. Except the only time when they've like given Trump credit is when he backed down from going to war with Iran after they shot down a US drone. So, we got a guy on Twitch right now, Slugman, saying Jank book review in the future. Oh man. What do you guys think? Should I read his book and review it on here? Oh man.
I don't know. People don't want to see eye aids, so they don't probably need that in their life.
Eye aids. Oh man,
or it'd probably be ear aids in that
ear
case.
aids. That's right. Ear aids. Oh man, I mean, it's kind of grifty. I mean, I know everybody writes a book now if they do anything. Like I know Bernie wrote a book and made $1 million. I know Dave Rubin. Actually, this is really cringy. Dave Rubin wrote a book recently, and it was entitled "Don't Burn This Book," if I recall. And I guess some SJWs hit the book, so he got really triggered by it and outraged. But I'm like, he wanted them to burn the book so that he could pretend to be outraged and get attention.
You know,
like it's
Dave
a grift.
One of my favorite Dave Rubin quotes is this: "Jesus was surrounded by Muslims." That's how the Middle East was. That's literally the quote. That's
how the Middle East was. That's how the Middle East was. That's like saying that that like Henry VIII was surrounded by Bolsheviks. It's like what? Like what? No, dude, these people don't know anything, man. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. Like that's why I say it's like a grifty grift, because it's like obviously there are people out there that care about stuff, that write books and make money off of them. But like he doesn't know, he doesn't care. He just wants to make the money. Like that's it for him. The whole thing is just a grift for money. Like like there are libertarians out there that are like very aware of stuff and you know they care about the theory and everything and they'll write stuff and they'll make money and everything. Dave Rubin, he just, you know, his whole thing, all he's got is, hey, you know, I used to be on the left and now I'm a libertarian and you know, I'm gay, but I'm on the right wing. So isn't that edgy? It's like, it's basically like the Milo Yiannopoulos shtick, but not as alt-righty. which makes him even more boring in many ways to a lot of people. So
You know
He
what's
became a
funny about-
Christian.
He,
He became a Christian to own the libs.
you know what's funny about Dave Rubin is even though he grifted, he still gets more views per video than Kyle Kalinske and also the Young Turks.
Oh, what? Wait, more
Yeah.
than the Young Turks? Oh, that's gotta hurt Anna. That's gotta hurt Anna's feels. How many views does he get per video? I
He
haven't
gets about 100,000 per video.
Whoa, and how many subs? How many subs does he have? Like
1 million.
Well, so he has a fifth of subs and he gets twice their average. Oh man, that's embarrassing for the. He's boring. Honestly, he's more boring than Jank. Like, okay, are we in agreement here? Who's more boring? 6% Jank or Dave Rubin?
Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin's more boring, but he gets more views. Dude, that's so sad. Like, because everybody knows Jank's more interesting and he gets fewer views. Man, how sad is that?
Well, Dave Rubin, I think it's at least 10%. 10% of subscribers watch his videos, right? 100,000
Yeah.
to 1 million. So that's what, 10%. So that's not too bad. I think the rule is like 10 to 15%, and you're normally coasting okay.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally you want to be more like 25%, but if you're getting at least 10 to 15%, I think that's like the benchmark of like minimal. If you go lower than that, then it's really bad.
2%.
But yeah, if you're going to grift, you got to grift to the right wing because Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder are all doing well as far as views on YouTube.
That's true. That's true. But Ben Shapiro, I don't believe that Ben Shapiro's grifting. I believe he's genuine in all the beliefs that he puts out.
He's always been a Republican though. But I do think Steven Crowder's a grifter though. Steven Crowder's 100% a grifter.
Oh, he's a grifter for sure. He doesn't really care. He just wants to be edgy and make money and stuff. But Ben Shapiro, like if there was no money in doing what he's doing from that perspective and it was all in being like a birdie bro or whatever, he'd still be the fiscally conservative, social conservative, libertarian dude. Like I that's his genuine ideology. So, you know.
Well, I think the other thing when it comes to that kind of stuff, that's like, you know, at least on the Daily Wire, when it comes to like Andrew Cleveland or like, I don't know, like, you know, Ben Shapiro, at least they talk more about other issues, because it's like Steven Crowder, all he talks about is like, look at this fat feminist at this college that I debated. It's like, dude, you don't care about anything. You don't care. And I think he was against the Syrian strikes too. So
yes,
like, the dude's stupid.
No, but Ben Shapiro supported it. Ben Shapiro is good on foreign policy for the most part. So
yeah, I mean, Steven Crowder, all he cares about is owning the libs on college campuses. That's it. That's his entire ideology.
I mean,
the libs support it? Yes, then he's against it.
Then he's against it. That's the thing. See, that's how you can tell a grifter. It's like with Ben Shapiro, if like the libs agreed with him on something, he'd say that that's a good thing or whatever. Whereas with Steven Crowder, he'd take the other view to own them or whatnot. And it's sad. And got to trigger the libs. Like that's what Mike's saying in the chat right now. Got to trigger the libs. It's just that whole thing is so old. Like honestly, whenever I see that stuff, like the anti-SJW stuff where it's like own the feminists or whatever, it makes me feel like I'm living like in pre-Trump days, like 2015. Like it's a throwback to the past, you know?
Okay, so I have a question. Who do you think gets more views, Dave Rubin or the Daily Wire YouTube?
Oh, it's got to be the Daily Wire, right?
It's got to be the Daily Wire.
It's Dave Rubin.
What? Yeah,
the Daily Wire on YouTube. I know they're a really downloaded podcast, but a lot of their videos are only 20 to 30K.
Whoa, what? Dude.
Like they'll have some that boost up towards like 500K, but a bunch of the videos they post are within 25 to 50K viewers.
Damn, dude.
Dave Rubin should run for president.
Who's that?
Dave Rubin should run for president.
Dave Rubin. Can you imagine Dave Rubin, like his entire stump speech, his entire campaign, every single interview, every debate, every town hall will be, hey, you know, I used to be a progressive, but now I'm a classical liberal. And, I'm on the right, but I'm gay. Did you know that? That would be the extent of everything. Like, I mean, people said that Trump was repetitive. You know how he'd say the same story over and over again. There'd be some bogus thing or whatever. And people have accused Biden of doing the same thing too. I mean, everybody has, and they accused Klobuchar of that too. But I mean, if you're doing thousands of speeches, you're going to repeat things, right? But with Dave Rubin, the whole thing would be, well, I used to be a progressive, and now I'm on the right, and I'm gay. Like, it's like a Milo Yiannopoulos sort of thing. Like, except,
but Milo's a lot more entertaining.
but he's more entertaining because he's more like edgy and stuff. Like, Dave Rubin isn't really that edgy. He's just purely cringe. What I can't imagine is, like, who the hell are the 100,000 people or whatever that are watching all of his videos? Like, he's not really relevant in my view. Like, he's less relevant than Jank to me, Dave Rubin. Like, Dave Rubin, he's a failed comic who became a grifter who, his stand-up career, as I tweeted out, was laid to rest on Reese of Nightmare Fuel's channel's graphic. If you check out that graveyard graphic he has, what does the tombstone say? It says, "Here lies Dave Rubin's stand-up career." That's where it went. Like, he's not funny. He's snoring and boring. He's grifty, super grifty. He's lazy and greasy. I mean, what do 100,000 people see in that? Like, what?
Well, no, he owns the libs. I keep telling you this. He owns the libs.
He owns the libs. He owns the libs by being boring and repetitive. Oh man.
Well, I think one of the things that Dave Rubin does, kind of the reason why Joe Rogan's podcast is so successful, is he talks to a lot of different people. So it's not kind of like the same voice day after day and the same topics day after day, even though a lot of his videos are dunking on SJWs, but it comes from different perspectives. That's why I think it's a little bit more successful, a little bit more viewed, because you may not know who that person is and you want to hear him speak.
Oh man, that's actually a really good point. That's a really good point. I mean, I it's probably the case that, one of the reasons why this channel has been, growing, about 15%, every about every month now. But we've been growing a lot more now is because, like, I do these daily streams and get a lot of different guests and stuff on. Whereas if it was just me talking, probably wouldn't get as many views. Of course, it's a small channel and stuff, so it's kind of hard to say. But yeah, I think that's a good point. That what he's boring, he makes up for by having interesting people on. That'd make a lot of sense because the Daily Wire doesn't really do interviews. So
the Daily Wire, yeah, that is true though. But it's like, if you, but it's like all the interviews with Dave Rubin are like the same thing. He asks the same questions, the same stuff. It's like he'll always ask these people, "How did you leave the left? What does the left do to you now? Has the left like harassed you? Has like the left raped you or something like that? Can you speak about the left?" Like, that's all he cares about. That's it.
Anthony, hey Anthony, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why did you leave the left?
Because I'm red pilled.
Oh man, and what happened? Did they like come to your house? Did they rob your car?
Yeah, so what happened is the entire left, like the whole left, everything that's left of me came to my house and they destroyed it. And I'm living on the streets and in the sheets. And now I come here because I went overseas and I saw how degenerate America was, and I'm back to save the West. I'm here to save the West, and I have a Roman Catholic avatar, and I speak very pretentious.
No, dude, it's such a meme. It's such a meme. Oh man, I want to go to a comment here. Mike had said that, at least they get more views than Jimmy, but then he later said that he was wrong and that Jimmy gets more views than them. he's saying that Jimmy Dore, Neckbeard Jimmy, getting over 100,000 views on most of his videos. Yikes. Could somebody verify that? Like, I mean, I guess I believe you. It's just, it's surprising me. I always saw like Jimmy as somebody that once he left TYT, he only had like, his 20, 30,000 fans that stuck with him. But he's getting more views than TYT.
Yeah.
He's crazier than TYT. Like,
Yeah, he's cornered the market of crazies. So yeah, he's getting that many views.
He's trying to
oh
own
man.
the libs. Like I said, the libs are a problem.
Yeah, he owns the libs. He owns the libs, I guess, but by being a communist and a socialist and stuff. But Elongated Musk on YouTube says, I always love that clip of Larry King cucking Dave Rubin. And I love that clip too. My favorite part about that clip is how long it is. It goes on for like 8 minutes of Larry King taking the phone call and just continuing to talk to his son as they're live on air right in front of him. And Dave Rubin's with his idol who has no respect for him, thinks he's a grifter. So he's like, yeah, this is more important than anything that this chump here, Dave Rubin, is going to ask me. Because Larry King knows he's just going to ask you, like, what do you think of the left? What do you think of the libs? Did the libs harass you? I used to be on the left. I'm actually, people are surprised that I'm gay, but I'm on the right. Like partisan hackery, that kind of stuff. So Larry King's like, yeah, he's not important. He's a waste of my time. I'd rather talk with my son while I'm on air. And of course, the thing that's funny about that is some people has said, well, did he really mean it offensively towards Dave Rubin, or did he just want to talk with his son or whatever? And I'm like, the guy's been in media for like decades. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly how disrespectful that was. He does the same thing Dave Rubin does, except he's not cringy about it. He knew he was cucking him. He totally knew he was cucking him, and Dave Rubin totally knew he was getting cucked. And Dave Rubin has to have his little fakey, grifty smile where he's like, "Oh yeah, like yeah, I guess how's your son doing?" And oh yeah, and then 5 minutes later, like, oh yeah, you guys are still talking about baseball. That's cool. Oh man, you could see it. You could see it. He was so infuriated.
What did the left do to baseball?
Hey, Jaeger. When did you leave the left?
Well, I don't know if I've crossed that bridge yet. I'm just gonna kind of sit in the middle, sit on the top of the fence, and just kind of go back from side to side for a little while, see if I can get some of that liberal money and some of that conservative money.
But you can't own the feminists if you sit on the fence. You gotta go and be a classical liberal like Dave Rubin.
It'd be really funny.
There's some truth, but I can still own them from being on the fence, and then people can attack me and say I'm right wing, and then I can come back and I can own the conservatives, and they can attack me for being left wing. I'm gonna make money off of both sides.
Hey, but you would be really funny if like we gave a tour of Afghanistan to Dave Rubin, and he asks like one of the Taliban leaders, like, "Hey, do you guys hate the left?" And he says something, and he says like, "Oh yeah, then we're buddies then." You
but
both
then
hate
he
the
tells
liberals?
them. He tells them they used to be. Like he tells them, he's like, "Yeah, we're both on the right, but hey, I'm gay." And they tell him like, "You're going to be executed for being a degenerate."
And then that's the last time you see him.
That's the last time you see him. It's like the last video from Dave Rubin it's like there's like 4 Taliban guys in black masks behind him, and he's in a cave somewhere, and they're like, and they're speaking in like, they're speaking in like their native language and all this sort of stuff, and they're there, and they give their speech, and they're like, death to America and all this stuff. And then there's Dave Rubin there, like giving his final words. And, he's not praying or anything. He's not like saying to his family how he loves them or whatever. He's saying how, well, I used to be on the left, but now I'm on the right and I'm a classical liberal. And like, that's all he knows. That's all he knows. That's all he knows. Like, I mean, see, people have asked me before if like I'm a classical liberal, or it's like, oh, you sound like a classical liberal. It's like, I don't like the label classical liberal. Even if I agreed with all that stuff, I wouldn't like it because it's loaded with baggage. Like, because classical liberal is basically like neoliberal when it comes to economics. So the problem is classical liberal these days is basically your tradcon alt-righty dude that isn't a socialist, because a lot of those guys are socialists now. They're still all like huge Stefan Molyneux fans, Jordan Peterson fans and stuff, but they're not cringy on the economics in my view. Whereas a lot of those far righter sort of people go full socialist and stuff like that. And I mean, and of course, in fairness to Jordan Peterson, at least he's not a socialist or anything. But Stefan Molyneux,
Actually, I think Jordan Peterson would be more funny to take to Afghanistan. It's like you take him on a tour, and he asks like a soldier on the base, "You should clean your room before fighting the Taliban," and he just like walks away with the most cryptic messages, and people are like, "What the hell is this guy doing? Why is he here?" Like that's Jordan Peterson.
Oh man, I feel like with Dave Rubin especially, he's the kind of guy that like I don't see his sort of shtick going anywhere in the long run. I mean, I'm surprised it's lasted this long. Honestly, I feel like he's gonna get to a point where like he'll still have the subscribers or whatever, but not get that much in the way of views, and he's kind of not going to have the same momentum or whatever. I don't see him lasting that long, because at least with somebody like me or other people that we got small channels or whatever, we're like dedicated. Like, like I'm a hawk through and through, right? Like I'll be here for 50 years, regardless of how many people are watching. But with Dave Rubin, he's only doing it for the money. So at some point he's going to go away because he's going to realize that the money dried up. So I don't know, man. I just for him, like he better make the most out of the grift, I guess, while he's able to, because I don't know how long this grift is going to last on his end. He's just he seems boring. I honestly think that like Jimmy Dore's grift and Kremlin Kyle's grift is going to last a lot longer than Dave Rubin's, but that's just my view. So
honestly, I could actually see Jimmy Dore like filling in like I can see him uniting the Bernie or Bust movement and the Nazbols together. Like he can get the Paleocons and he can get the Bernie or Busters together, and he'll form his own like little political union. It'll be super cringy. Like I can totally see that because he has the worst of both worlds.
oh man, Jaeger's pointing out in the chat that David Pacman has low views. Lots of videos under 20K views. I checked Pacman's channel today, and he had like 830,000 subscribers or something. So that's a pretty low count. That's like 2.5%. That's kind of well, what is that? I guess you say 3%, but yeah, David Pacman. Yep.
And he would be one of the ones that would be a little bit more reasonable than the rest.
Yes.
Be a lot more reasonable than Jimmy Dore, a lot more reasonable than Kremlin Kyle.
That's true.
A lot more reasonable than Sam Cedar, who's most boring person out of them all.
That's true.
Oh, I hate Sam Cedar, man.
He's more boring than Dave Rubin.
Oh man, Reese calls him Sniveling Sam, right? Like, because he always snivels. Sam Cedar. I don't like Sam Cedar. I used to watch his stuff, Majority Report, just to keep up with his talking points. I can't stand how they want to go back to like 1940s, 1950s era socialism as if that's like the future. It's just those guys, man. They're like unironic Corbyn fans, literally.
Yeah, Sam Cedar's another one that has a lot of videos underneath 20K as well. Just looking that up. So, but yeah, I think he's by far, you can call him sniveling, but that would probably give him too much credit to have an emotion. He is. Nails on a chalkboard boring. Like, I'd rather hear nails on a chalkboard than listen to him speak.
Yeah, Reese did a video on him, and, he basically described it as like a torturous process. Let's say to Sam. I don't. Yeah, but you know who's worse than Sam Cedar? Way worse. Like he makes Sam Cedar look like a moderate, like Joe Biden. You know who I'm talking about? I'm talking about Michael Brooks, unironic stan of Kim Jong Un and Kim Il Sung.
Have you seen Mike from PA on Twitch?
I
That's
have
even
it.
further. Mike from PA, he's got Soviet T-72 emoji. I think I've told you about this guy before. He's got Soviet T-72
Oh
emojis.
yeah.
Um, he unironically calls himself what's it called, like the Communist Central Planning Party or whatever, and like
That's right.
he
No,
has
you
like
mentioned that. Oh man.
he is so larpy. It's really weird. And
Oh
he
man.
thinks like Sam Cedar is degenerate or some crap. Like yeah, like that guy's on Twitch, and like
Oh
he's
man.
like that guy's like so far to the left. Like oh man, like I don't know, like it's him or Sam Piker, man. Like they
We're talking about Pac-Man, but even Pac-Man just the other day called George W. Bush a war criminal. So, like, even Pac-Man, who's like the most reasonable of these people, buys into like these far anti-American propaganda points about like,
see. I feel like with David Pac-Man, I think a lot of it is for his viewer base. Like he's actually explained this before. Like he's actually a lot more moderate than his viewers himself, because he's even stated on YouTube videos or even on live streams that like, hey, like I don't talk about Venezuela because it doesn't get very many views and people get mad at it, you know, because he's there to make money, you know. So I feel like David Pac-Man, like personally, I feel like he's a little bit more apolitical, and I feel like he's more like center, if anything, because like if you actually like hear him like speak, like in you know, like in other places and stuff like that, like you can just tell that like his audience is a lot further than him, and he's just trying to make sure that he makes money. And the way to make money is you have to you have to toe the line
oh
of people
man,
who are giving you money, and they want to hear him say that George Bush is a war criminal. Now, does
man.
David Pac-Man really think that? Maybe. I mean, it's likely, but I think it's more for the views. Like that's
You
just
know
my
what?
opinion on it.
You're probably right on that, but like he's making like 8,000 a month, and he's been making a lot of money for a long time. Like at some point, like what's the point in making the money? Like what's the point in having all that money if you can't speak your mind? Like I don't understand that. Like that's what doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, if I had $1 million right now, I mean, you know, or if I had no money, I'd still say the truth as I see it, right? But if I had $1 million, I'd have even more incentive to, or if I had, you know, 8,000 a month or whatever coming in. I understand, you know, for him, the idea is like he'd probably be worried that if he said something like George W. Bush wasn't a war criminal, that money would dry up. But I guess I would never be in a position where if I said George W. Bush wasn't a war criminal, that the people that support me wouldn't support me anymore. Like because I'm a hawk. Like the whole thing here is this is a hawkish channel. But for him, he must to some extent believe it. Like he's got to believe it. Like I've watched Pac-Man. I don't think that Pac-Man would just lie. I don't know. Me, I don't know him well enough. But I feel like he probably was saying the truth as he sees it. But
It's
but he
probably a
just
mix
doesn't
of
know.
both. It's probably a mix of both. I mean, he doesn't really talk about international politics a whole lot. So
True.
again, like I think it's like a mix of both. Like on one hand, he feels it, and on the other hand, it's just like, okay, I want an extra dollar. You know, like again, like a lot of it's because they want to hear what their audience has to say. You know,
True. True.
I like I feel like when it comes to people like Kyle Kalinske, I kind of believe it's more genuine just because of his rhetoric and just because how he says things. And like I feel like he like actually believes it. Where it's like I think when it comes to David Pac-Man, just the tone and the body language kind of show that I don't know if he cares as much as his followers. Like I feel like Kyle
Mm.
Kalinske is as radical as his followers. Like
Yeah.
that's what makes it funny.
Yeah, no, I guess you're probably right about that. What's amazing, of course, is that Vosh endorsed Biden, and his followers are like even more radical than Kyle's. So,
Oh yeah, and they called him a neocon or some shit. Like it was insane.
A neocon apologist. I don't think they actually called Vosh a neocon, but they call him an apologist for neocons. So
Yeah, something like that. But
because
it's
they
like,
think
yeah,
Biden's a neocon. Imagine that. Imagine thinking Joe
that's kind of
Biden's
cool.
a neocon.
That's
Like,
kind of cool. See, the thing is, all these labels they give them are actually cool.
yeah, who doesn't
that's the
want to be a
thing.
neocon? It's based to be a neocon. Neocons live rent free in the heads of basically everybody that's on the crazy side, like far right, far left. Anybody who's like outside the center left to center right, they're just nonstop 24/7 obsessed thinking about how, oh, the neocons, I have to own the neocons, I have to own the neocons, the neocons are running everything, the neocons are the deep state. It's like who doesn't want to be a neocon? Like it sounds badass, honestly. Like neocon ghouls, that sounds so based. Sounds so based. What a fail of a nickname. I mean, Kyle's got two different types of nicknames that he'll use. He's got nicknames like Amy Cloudboot Jar and Tap Jaker, where they're just really corny, dorky plays on words that don't mean anything, and they're weak. But then he's also got nicknames where he'll call people like, neocon ghouls. And it's like, and it backfires. And you're like, no, that's actually a badass nickname in the other direction. Like you just made your opponent sound cool. So he sucks, man. Like Kremlin Kyle, I've watched him for quite a while. Once you've seen like 3 or 4 of his videos, you've really seen them all. You know exactly what he's gonna say. Like you know exactly what he's gonna say. So Arthur's in the chat, neocon ghoul, and he's got like Reese's skeleton configuration there on both sides of it. No, I like that. I like that a lot. Like I had my handle on Twitter, neocon ghoul, for a while, but let's see. So he says sometimes you gotta get more radical to get more centrist, I guess. Oh man, yeah, it's funny. Kyle went for Bernie or bust, and Vosh went for Joe Biden. So, but with that, we're gonna wrap things up now. Thanks to the 10 or so people for being with us the whole night for about 3 hours. Super based. Thanks to you guys for coming on. We're gonna go to closing remarks. We'll start with Jaeger, and then we'll go to Anthony.
So thanks for having me on. Just as far as clothing, we started with the Lincoln Project versus Donald Trump, and kind of the differences between what they want in modern conservatism versus what Donald Trump currently is for the modern conservative movement, and seeing if there's a way forward. And I think the 2016 election will have a lot of ramifications for which group is going to lead the Republicans into the future. Then we started talking about college, all the different modifications, which was a lot of fun. And then we ended talking about some of the YouTubers out there that aren't getting as many views as they'd like you to believe. So a lot of fun. So thanks for having me on, and that's all I have.
Yeah, that's a great summary of the stream. Excellent. Oh man. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And with that, we're gonna go to Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, I think the topics that we covered tonight were really cool. Some that I didn't really expect, So I think when it comes to, like a lot of these issues, I think it's good to at least open up a discussion to them. I mean, none of us here are policy wonks, but I think it's good to get different perspectives, because on YouTube, this is the entertainment platform. And I think Kevin does pretty well for the most part. And I think bringing up these other kind of issues are good too, because I think Kevin has said, we talk about other things. It's not just getting the hawk pill, it's getting the college education pill, it's getting the college debt pill, it's getting the Dave Ramsey pill. So there's lots of pills he's dicing out to people. I mean, he's a pharmacist. He doesn't just dish out neocon pills. He gives other types of pills. I mean, he's got a whole trench coat worth of pills. So and that's what he's dishing out. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And thanks for having me out on the platform.
Oh man. Yeah, no, thanks for coming on, guys. And we got somebody new on Twitch saying, thanks for streaming. Eric H. So I guess he's been watching for a while. Awesome. Be sure to follow to everybody. Be sure to follow us over on Twitch if you can. That'd be great. We're trying to get up to 50 followers right now to make the affiliate program on there.
How many are you at?
Well, last I checked before we streamed, we were at 20. So it's been going up by about 2 every day. So if we can get to 50, that'd be based. And be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. But yeah, dishing out pills. Like it's like that phrase that I have to describe based Biden. I call him skilled and pilled like a pharmacist because he dishes out pills. And he's obviously very skilled. He's skilled statesman. And we need somebody like that in this time. I mean, you want somebody who knows what they're doing in a time of crisis and whatnot. And our civilization is at stake here as we are pitted against the fascist and communist powers of Russia and China in Eurasia, who seek world domination and to subvert our interests on the world stage. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to like the video here, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Also, if you'd like to directly support the channel financially, you can go over to patreon.com/superpowerbroadcasting and support my work there. I'll be back here again, of course, tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. We're streaming at that time every time, 7 days a week. And we're trying to get up to $100 a month over on Patreon right now. Once I hit $100 a month on Patreon, I'll have a daily pre-recorded video in addition to daily streams. So, with all that being said, we had a decently active chat tonight. Always awesome to see. Thanks for everybody for coming in and participating in the chat. And with that, have a good night, everybody. Peace.